Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of By the Numbers with me, Richard Lewis, and Duncan Thorin Shields. I'll say at the top, this is going to be a show all about exploring illness. The physical illness that I've got, apparently I've been diagnosed with pneumonia. I can see where this is going.
Okay, yeah. What other types of illness, Rich?
I know, what other types of illness? Or the mental illness.
Oh, that one, yeah.
Yeah.
Starting strong.
Time stamp the whole intro.
The mental illness that has occupied your Twitter feed lately, Duncan.
It's good, isn't it?
And for once, it's not coming from you. It was all about your top 10. So I thought we'd start the show with that because basically I am literally dying on my ass. I've got to wait for these new antibiotics to kick in. I'm worried. I make jokes about it. I think I'm easy E, mate. And I don't mean good at rapping. You know?
Not just taking all the money of mortality.
Yeah, shit, dude. Like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. I've been sick for like 4 fucking weeks. Like, I can't sing Cruising Down the Lane in my 6'4" anymore. It's all happening. Like,
no, here's the thing, Rich. What you're referring to, obviously, is that yesterday I put out my latest version of the world rankings, which is something that I have done literally for 3 years. You know, back when there was no rankings. People will forget this because, you know, a lot of new fans, they won't know. There was no HLTV.org rankings. Those guys just sat on their asses, you know, waiting for some dodgy sponsor to come along that could give them money to get rich fast with little kids or something, you know. But I actually introduced the concept of doing rankings, etc. I've maintained the same criteria for all the 3 years. No matter whether I like a team or dislike a team, I still rank them the same way. Hence why some of my favorite teams of all time, classic example, Titan with Kenny S. I don't think they ever got higher than 5th on my ranking. I think that's maybe the highest they ever got to. Right. So, point we're going to get to here is, you would think with all the things that have happened in my career, obviously I've made jokes some people were offended by or get triggered by, you know. At times I might have made missteps where I've been politically insensitive, you could say. But no, what happened now was I updated some rankings entirely within the consistent context of how I've done every ranking for 3 years. And anyone who thinks, right, because there's this like weird sort of like counter circle jerk that says that Brazilian fans are only this way because of everyone else. Yeah. Right? That's the logic, right? Is it plausible that bizarrely, when the Brazilian teams weren't that good, we didn't really get much abuse? In fact, actually, because we were generally just bigging up a team that was a pretty good underdog team, everything was pretty hunky-dory. It was pretty cool. In fact, all we ever used to say about the Brazilian scene is like, wow, what great hard workers they are. Aren't they showing up NA who's got more money and more talent and, you know, blah, blah, blah. But then you get to when the Brazilian teams have any success. And what's funny is our show is the perfect record of this. Because do you remember, it was after the first ever event that Luminosity did really well at, DreamHack Winter, where at that event, because they got all these unexpected best of 3 wins in a row, we made this point that like the level of abuse we were getting just for like predicting that an underdog wouldn't win a series was unreal. And from there onwards, I made that point on that show that unfortunately, because I'm knowing the history of, first of all, Brazilians in Counter-Strike and MMA was the other example I gave you. I told you that unfortunately, when they have good athletic competitors, this terrible, really, really horrible streak comes out in their fan base with the worst vocal elements. And since then, there has been so much abuse that the usual cycle has powered up where you can do 2 things with it. You can either just ignore it completely. If you can do that, great. You're a better man than I am. Congrats. Personally, if you've noticed the trend I have is once a group fucks with me enough, I do 2 things. One, I go, okay, let's accept the premise then and have some fun with it. If the premise is that I supposedly hate them, well, let's just trigger them some more. Now, I'll never say things that genuinely I don't believe. I realize idiots are going to be like, yeah, but what about this time that you said a joke? Like, by the way, that is entirely in my prerogative to tell you what is a joke or not. But generally, if I'm making actual analysis, I'm never going to do it on the basis if I like or dislike a team, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was really weird, like, again, just the reaction to it, because first of all, it's a top 10. And even if you were to take very mechanical and dry statistical criteria, it would always be subjective in the sense you personally may disagree with that criteria, right? Like there is no definitive top 10. But one of the things that has always pissed me off with any rankings, be it like a definitive top 10 as a snapshot or a moment in time, or power rankings, or yours, which are a rolling ranking over a 3-month period. people never seem to understand the criteria that goes in. They look back at 1 week.
Yes.
And they go, well, in my mind, at this moment in time, this is what a top 10 should look like. And it's like, well, to appeal to you and stop you being unreasonable, I would have to completely forego the entire criteria, the very premise on which my top 10 is founded, which is it's over a rolling period of 3 months. Now, I will say this. It must have been incredibly close to
one of the closest I've ever seen for number one.
Yeah. So,
I was even myself thinking, which way do I go on this one? And as a result, I always have the same philosophy with that, Rich, which is, as I said at the outset, I try to keep it consistent. So what I try to do is, over the years, I've been faced with, usually not at number one, admittedly, usually it'll be like 7 and 8, I've had to be faced with areas where there was no clear-cut one. So I had to pick, right, which criteria am I going to value more? Or how am I going to pick consistency over peak, And so generally, I know, thanks to having so much experience doing the rankings, which side I come down on that. So I just do it. What I say is do it consistently. Therefore, if a team was number one for that reason a year ago, this team should be number one for that reason now, whether I agree with it or not. Like, the best part of all of this, Richard, let's see if you might have seen this tweet. I don't know, but let's just assume you haven't seen the million tweets I've done, right? Because obviously I did a lot when people go ham like that. But if I had to ask you this, right? So I've ranked FaZe number one. I did a video recently saying maybe it's going to be the FaZe era. The last few videos I've said FaZe is actually amazing. I still think that they haven't I don't think the two events were a flash in the pan, right? With all of that said, do you know who I think the number one team in the world is?
Go on.
SK Gaming.
Oh, right. Good.
Because that's a key premise here, right?
Yeah.
That number one team today isn't the same as number one team over the last 3 months. I mean, I don't know why this is a hard premise to get. Again, this really makes me wonder, Rich, if people either watch traditional sports or if they do, but they don't understand, even these concepts in journalism and traditional sports, which is for example, okay, let's say in tennis that we had Wimbledon happen, right? And at Wimbledon, a guy who before was let's say he was fourth in the rankings, goes ham and he wins the whole event. And not only does he win it, he does it so dominantly that you're right, this guy's probably the best tennis player. It doesn't matter. It will take 2 or 3 months before the rankings catch up to that. Because in tennis, for example, they use a 12-month rolling system. So you have to wait for some of your bad results to knock off, and then your good results essentially are more valuable. It never is going to instantly update, is it?
But one of the reasons the tennis ranking is really good is it undeniably rewards consistency.
Yes.
That's why it's a good system. If you take a snapshot in time, you might be well, he hasn't won the last 3 tournaments he's attended. No, but over 2016 or whatever it is, he's won the most, or been in the final the most times, or whatever it is. I was really perplexed. What's the general abuse been like? I mean, has it been? Have the death threats come back?
Oh, the death threats are always a hallmark of Brazilian comments. That's just a fact. Right. I could literally, it's a shame I just mute people and just actually delete shit from my Facebook, because obviously I don't want, anyone who's why do you delete it? I don't really want a collection of 10,000 retarded comments about me, unsurprisingly. I want to move on with my life, if I have one, indeed. Luckily I will, because I won't be going to South America or below the equator in general. So
some of your exes have told me that about you, mate.
Yeah, I know. So here's the thing, right? Listen, mate, I don't fucking play around. You'll be eating lunchbox anytime you fucking want. I'm going out to fancy restaurants, taking that lane. The fuck, eh?
Right, go on. Yeah, I'm back.
Right.
I'm back.
So anyway, here's the thing. It's not even in proportion on this matter either. Remember, I haven't made a tweet "Dear world, FaZe is better than SK. Fuck you. Fuck everyone from the country, SK." No, I haven't made a tweet like that at all. But the response may as well be, right?
Yeah.
Because the response generally went along the lines of I disagree, therefore you're a moron. You've lied. You're actively lying and trying to downplay SK. You're a FaZe fanboy. I love that one, by the way, because how can I be a fanboy of every team except your team? Is that just the way every fan's going to make it work?
Yeah.
Then there's
actually, yes.
There were even people who told me that I'm a massive fanboy of Nico because I'm always saying Coldzera is shit. I don't know if you followed this year in Counter-Strike. Let's just say this year, right? I think I've given Coldzera almost every single MVP of the year. I don't think I've ever given Nico one in 2017. I might have given him maybe for IM New York. I'm not sure. That might have been it. ESL New York, right? Like generally, they haven't even got these facts right. Then there's the other ones, which is along the lines, because, it's one thing to actually attack the criteria when you don't understand it, which the majority of people didn't, by the way. Like, there's two ways they went, Rich. One is they were totally dishonest and reverse engineered the opinion they wanted. So I had tons of people, as you might have seen on my timeline, giving me stats like, you've lied about the stats. Look, if you count from epicenter onwards, I don't know, I count 3 months so. Yeah, but you're just making that up as a convenient excuse to make SK not number one. Well, again, do I have a time machine? Have I gone back like the Terminator and gone back 3 years and gone, fucking hell, right, guys, I know you're not going to understand why I'm implementing this 3-month system, but I've got to really fuck over this Brazilian team that I think is one of the best, in fact, the best in the world, 3 years from now. But why are you going to do that, though? Just to fuck with some fans, because I really hate, like, it's not a plausible scenario again, is it? Then there's the people who are like, oh, well, if you're not counting just those 4 tournaments, well, they've won 7 tournaments this year. Again, 3-month period, though. Oh, so you don't count tournaments, they win. Well, no, I don't count any tournaments anyone wins outside the 3-month period. Convenient excuse. Again, it's not an excuse. It's just facts from the outset that have always been the case. Never changed them. Haven't altered them right now. Like, most people who hate me seem to think I just sit down and go, who do I like? Tell you what, favourite team in the world. They think it's Thorin's top 10 favourite teams, don't they? They don't think it's even a ranking. And then, by the way, just to trigger you, there was probably at least half of the Brazilians that actually just said, this shows how I'm not even a journalist, how I should be banned from events. Yeah. I like that one. One person even said, Rich, you'll appreciate this because it's just so well crafted. He said, this is why the internet's owners should ban this person from uploading any content. Even that guy's conception of the internet itself. I don't know if he's
like it's just two dudes. Yeah. Should we let Duncan have the internet? No, I'm gonna turn it off.
I'm gonna block him. Yeah. Who is the internet's orders? Fucking hell. Straight Illuminati. Like fucking the Rothschilds are like Thorin's out of order. What do you mean? I thought we were just letting him go wild.
Hit the off switch.
He's put FaZe number 1, hasn't he? Fucking Nico fanboy, right? Have him commit suicide by shooting himself twice in the
head. Oh, mate. But here's the thing. The reason I wanted to bring it up on the show is I thought this would give them a consolation prize that might take the heat off. Because I think we're both in agreement that if you had to say right now, in this moment in time, in the present moment, who's the number 1 team in the world? And you did. You already said it. You said it's SK Gaming.
Here's the thing. I don't think it's by a million miles. As we said, it's very close. No. But the factor that at the moment FaZe is reaching all the finals and SK is also reaching all the finals and SK beats FaZe every time, it's a hell of a reason to even kind of hedge the next few months and say, I think SK will probably be better than FaZe the next few months, right? You'll also note, by the way, at no point in time will anyone ever find a video of me saying that this is the FaZe era or it's going to be the FaZe era. You'll never find a video of that.
I've said that plenty.
Oh, I think it's still possible. I think also as it was quite plausible coming into this scenario now,
Well, we'll get into that in a second because obviously SK Gaming did win another tournament, another great performance, lots to talk about there. But I thought since we're just talking about Brazil stuff, so first of all, I've been inundated. I've had a similar thing to you. I've been inundated with messages and hate mail and stuff at the moment.
Okay.
The premise being that I am somehow a hypocrite, which again. It's a word that gets thrown around.
For what reason this time?
Yeah, for what reason this time? Because I haven't said anything about the E-League situation with Bolts and Steel. Now, this is actually a lie. I have been quite clear about it. I think I've said on this podcast a bunch of times, I wanted Bolts and Steel to play at the major, but I wanted them to play within Immortals. I wanted them to be the guys that held that slot, not the 3 people that effectively fucked them over. Now that we get into this more convoluted and difficult situation, as the rules are written down, this looks to be the right application of the rules, yeah?
I'll just go ahead and say this now, and if this is in any way a controversial statement, you guys haven't been following sports or Counter-Strike at all, which is, as far as I'm aware, practically every single rule dispute at a big tournament over the last 3 years was absolutely by the book what it said in the rule book. It's just that you don't like the rule. Now, that's totally fine. And you can definitely say, I don't like this rule. It's stupid. I think it should be different. And you can absolutely pressure the tournament organizer for next tournament, please change this rule. That's a great approach to take. Two things you can't do is one, say, because I don't like this rule, it's wrong and it's actually against its own rules. That's just incorrect. And secondly, I made this point on my roster lock video with Lurpus and Flying DJ. Even if you don't like the rule, you can't ask for it to change now. The tournament's already underway. Like, what you don't understand is every time you do something like that, you make it even more unfair. Like, imagine this, Rich. Imagine a scenario where they actually did get back to, like, Valve and E-League got together and said, you know what, there's all this community outrage. And then one of them, for some inexplicable reason, was like, plus, I really love watching SK, so I'd love to see them have a better lineup. Like, I don't know why anyone would ever bring that up in a discussion about rules, but that seems to be the primary point people are bringing up as to why the rules should be changed. They wouldn't really be giving a fuck if it was like Vega Squadron or something, would they? But anyway, let's say that they did change the rule now, right? There's a world in which I could literally come out, and let's say there's some of the teams that there's rumors might change a player, right? Let's say I come out and I'm North, and I go, what the fuck? You're going to let them change a player? I would have changed a player a month ago if I didn't know that was possible. I actually had a player I was going to sign. I've stuck with a lineup that's ailing at the moment, not doing very well, all because you told me these are the rules. You see what I mean? It would actually create more unfair scenarios than it would fix.
Yeah, and like you say, the way the way the lie is being peddled, like there's a bunch of, again, very mentally ill people that have, like, one guy, for example, was spamming me on Twitter saying, haha, I have 100 Twitter accounts. You can't ban them all. Why can you've only got 100, you stupid cunt? So once I've hit ban on that 100th account, I win. Like, GG.
Also, like, I love people like that. Like, this is like a guy who literally doesn't even understand how war of attrition works. You know how many clicks and how much hassle it is to make 100 Twitter accounts. Meanwhile, to ban 100 Twitter accounts, I think it's about, well, it's 100 mouse movements and then 2 clicks per account. So if you're willing to just do 200 clicks, you've banned all of his accounts that might have taken like 3 hours to make. Like,
yeah, exactly. So
fuck everything about your life.
So, but it's what I don't even understand what he was doing. The premise of what he was spamming me with was that I was a hypocrite, right? And again, I've never said anything hypocritical. I actually lean on the side of liking the roster locks and wanting them to be there. I think we would be in an absurd Counter-Strike landscape if we just let people change players whenever they wanted around tournaments. You would get situations where big teams wouldn't qualify and they would literally ring out their players to other teams as a revenue stream. So guys like Na'Vi, you're like, well, we didn't qualify for the major again, but it doesn't matter. We can make just as much money because we'll sell Simple to the highest bidder for that one event.
Here's something people don't stop and think about as well. God forbid the teams that have the ownership conflict of interests. Like, you do realize that means if SK wanted to, in a world without the roster lock, I mean, obviously they wouldn't because Bolts is an official member, but they could have just been like, what? Na'Vi had their media rights owned by ES Force. Oh, we'll just borrow Simple. Like, how unbelievably broken would that make the fucking tournament? Whether they did one or not, you know.
So the central premise of hypocrisy is that you apply one set of morals or values or ideas and beliefs, and then at the first sign that it would anyway benefit you or benefit a friend, you then just reverse and don't apply them. Well, I've never done that. I've always been very consistent on what my beliefs are. Plus, the idea that I am in any way sort of being paid off by E-League not to talk about this. It's not my job. It's not my job. I have zero input. Well, I wouldn't say zero input. Obviously, I can like ring them up and be like, hey, guys, have you seen these Reddit threads? People are upset about that. And they're going to go, yeah, but they're the rules, Rich. And I had this before with SK Gaming.
Yes.
When they changed.
Luminosity to SK change.
Yeah, when the Luminosity SK Gaming thing happened and people were attacking me for it. And I was like, well, first of all, they're the rules. Second of all, I sit on a desk. I write a column. I suggest what games we might use. I used to have input on talent, but then I realized that was creating a weird dynamic among my fellow talent. So I even backed off from that because I don't want to have it. I don't want to be like, oh, well, I didn't get hired for this gig. And then I have to go work with someone in the future and they think they didn't get hired because of me. So that was something I recused myself from. Or, you know, like, I'm happy to represent E-League. Obviously, I work for E-League. I love E-League. They've been a great game changer for me in my life. I'm very proud of the product that we put on. But I am not involved with every facet of E-League. And because what would be the point of employing anyone else?
Oh,
why would we have a commissioner? Why would we have a general manager? Why would we have all of these other people that make it possible if it was just all about Richard Lewis? It's not.
What's funny is this is actually a great moment, by the way, where I can make a serious point that we're not just being facetious when we say mentally ill for people. By the way, anyone who gets mad at that is exactly the sort of person who should get mad at it, because anyone who's actually a normal person understands the way language works and not everything is literal. Like, you are in no way making fun of actual mentally ill people by saying mentally ill. Same as if you say the word retarded or stupid or moron or imbecile. What happens is that's just a little game that people who want to police language play, where they go, right, this year, these 5 words are allowed and these 10 aren't. And then next year, we're going to change it. So if you don't keep up with my personal list, you are a bigot. Like, no, that doesn't work at all. But secondly, in this exact instance, so the example you gave there, which happens a lot, by the way, happened to me, obviously, in this scenario with the rankings. I had people telling me, you are a FaZe shill. You have just been paid off by FaZe. Now, they're not saying that as a joke, by the way. They're not being facetious. They actually think there's some truth to that. If you actually think anyone who holds a different opinion than yours must have been paid by the companies involved, you actually have a mental illness. Now, you have to understand, mental illness isn't all about like latent hereditary genetic problems. When you get into thought patterns which are harmful to your life, that is mental illness. Like, there's a great example, right, where there's a comedian in Britain, famously from the show Have I Got News for You, called Paul Merton. And at one point in his life, he actually went and checked himself into a mental health place because he'd become convinced, for whatever reason, that he was being like constantly stalked by Freemasons. And what happened was, I guess through discussion with a friend or something, he realized, holy fuck, what an irrational thought pattern I'm in now. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So he actually went, even though he's just a normal guy and he was absolutely a functional professional, went and checked himself in for, like, I think like 6 months in a mental health place and just helped himself get out of it because he was mentally ill in that moment. So the point is, think what a ludicrous premise that is, that these people have to be paid to have a different opinion than you.
Yeah. So again, I don't know. My understanding is that when you take on a major, you use the major rule set.
Yes.
So I don't know how hands-on Valve are with the implementation of those.
Thing is, I know for some things they are. Like, I'll give you an example. Listen, I don't work for E-League anymore, so I can just fucking say there's nothing they can do about it. So when the last E-League major was happening, I actually remember for one of the minors, it might have been the Americas minor, that Minsik, the guy who's, I mean, what's his title? The commissioner of E-League, is it still?
Yeah, he's It was commissioner at the time. Now he's got a bit more responsibility, so he's like chief, head of operations, head of league operations or something.
I remember he came to me for that America's minor, and because he's heard all my videos where I'm always like, there should be fucking seeding and you've got to invite the right teams, all this stuff. He said to me, okay, hypothetical, if you had all these teams, which ones would you give the 4 invites to? And then if you had the invites, how would you seed them? And I told him these answers, and he went away and he came back and basically said, sorry, we can't do any of that. Like, I've brought it to Valve and I've told them, and then they were like, we don't want that. So, like, that's why I say it sounds to me like a pretty grey area. And the idea no one has any information on this and they're all going mental is like the standard scenario,
Yeah, like I say, I mean, I've deliberately kept myself out of it because, I can't say, oh, well, it's not my fucking wheelhouse, it's not my job. But also here is completely what it's all about, so I'm just like, I'm not saying anything because that's just the obvious thing to do. These are the rules as they are written down, and there's rules as well. Which, like, I think if I looked at one of the other rules where it was like they had a date to finalize the roster, and Team Liquid hadn't even signed Steel by that date, so that would be irrelevant. So the Steel issue doesn't really come up. This is more of just an issue for Bolts, and as I said, as things stand, because he played the qualifier for another team, which is outlined in 3.1 of the rules, which says any player that participated in a minor, including the Americas qualifier, cannot change to any other team participating in the Major LAN qualifier or E-League major in any capacity. That is the exact wording of the rule. There's no other way to interpret it. There's no wiggle room, it's just...
And, yeah, think about this as well, right? Anyone, again, I'll just bring this back to the mentally ill point. Anyone who's suggesting this is because they're Brazilian, you are fucking mentally ill on a level where you really, like, I'm not even just saying this to be mean. You actually need to get some help in your life. If that's how the lens you are going to interpret the esports world through, not only are you going to wreak havoc and make a horrible effect on other people, but you're just going to have a horrible life yourself, because you're going to be in this ridiculous paranoid mindset where they've literally changed the whole rules, again, by the way, months before they could have ever known this was going to fucking happen, using a time machine that I let them hop. Right, what happened was I invented a time machine about a week ago, Rich, and when I was about to hop back, Minsick was like, can I just come with you? And I was like, oh, I'm going back to try and fuck up SK from years ago. And he goes, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, but just like 2 months ago. I go, all right, we'll make one stop, but then you better fucking do it right. And he's like, oh, bloody hell. Can we make one more? Can I make it so that if an organisation... No, obviously joke there.
But yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean? It's ludicrous. Yeah. Like this is why I made that point myself a couple of months ago on Twitter. There wasn't this outrage when Kirby couldn't play for Astralis. They had to use, in the end, they had used Glaive, but then they also had to use a fucking coach as a stand-in because the guy was actually too ill to play. They've literally applied these rules to anyone.
No,
they don't make the rule up and change it.
Yeah, you remember NIP having to use threat as well?
Yep.
Right. This is an ongoing issue. This isn't something that has just materialized in a bid to stop SK Gaming winning a major. Now, fortunately for them, they've got a registered player who has played on the team and is a fucking baller player.
You know, that's one of the elements, Rich, that makes me the most mad about this whole scenario, is that I actually get it, right? That if this was a scenario where they had to use their fucking coach, like say they had, I mean, he's not technically the coach, say they had to put Dead in the lineup, right?
Yeah.
I agree. Just like the Zonic example I gave you from Astralis, I think that's kind of out of order. I wouldn't like that to be. I'd like an exception to be possibly made, right? But let's be real, right? First of all, I noticed that they keep linking it to when they had to use Fox as well. No. You chose that. Like, you lost one tournament to Astralis in E-League Season 2, chose to make a cut when the next big tournament was the Major. That was entirely your choice. You could have taken what was a fantastic lineup and, in my opinion, had a real shot at winning that Major. You still did very well with Fox, but you didn't win. Then you come to this Major, right? Let's be absolutely real. For a team that has to use a stand-in, they have the best chance in the history of Counter-Strike to win a Major. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I still think they could fucking win the Major with Phelps. Like, he's such a good player. I've no doubt, actually, having all this time off's made him reassess his position, that I'm sure that he will be able to go into a lot of their past shit that they already have stored for a stand-in. What a fantastic scenario that is. So don't get me wrong. I wish they could use bolts as well. I agree with the whole premise. Yes, it will mean more if someone like FaZe beats them. And yes, it's all true, but that's all circumstantial narrative stuff. On the surface, they actually have not been as hard done by even as some of the past instances.
No, definitely not. And I mean, look, it's like I say, the only reason I wanted to talk about it, like at the end of the day, this isn't something that's just come out of thin air. This was always going to be the case for this major. That we knew this was going to be the case before the last two tournaments SK Gaming won. It's only now become sort of more of a hot button topic with the community because people are like, well, SK Gaming are on this great streak. Bolts has bedded into the team incredibly well, and there's going to be all these question marks about this major. But this isn't going to be the first major a team's going to go in having to use a stand-in or a suboptimal lineup. And it's certainly not the first time these rules have been applied to the letter as they are written down. I mean, that's all there is to it. At the end of the day, if anybody else can read that rule and tell me how it's being interpreted wrong, I'll pick up the phone and say to my E-League co-workers and colleagues, oh, wait, there was this interpretation of it, but there isn't any interpretation. That's the rule. That's what's going to happen. And if anything, for me, and this is where I'll definitely cop some heat, for me, it means maybe we should start thinking about how important a major is, the prestige, what it's all about, and start planning our roster moves accordingly around it, and maybe being a bit more robust and trying to work through problems. Sure, you can't. I love
that as well. By the way, this is a point. Okay, I'll just give you some context. So this is a point that has come up when people have discussed this topic among Fallen and the various pundits on Twitter. And here's the mad thing: as far as I know, Fallen himself has said, like, that they would have done this move no matter what, and that it's worth it. Well, which is it? You made a choice, and you're now saying even if you'd known that you wouldn't be able to use them for the major, you'd have done it anyway. So you're saying it's more important to have the other tournaments than the major. Then you have made your choice. What? It's not my. I've made a choice, and the consequences that I knew would come with the choice, I don't like them. Why'd you make the choice then? I'd still do it again. Fucking hell! Like, who are these people? I mean, by the way, in this scenario, this isn't an example of where I'm saying Fallen's an idiot or something. A lot of people do this. It's where you can be a brilliant thinker, but either you don't articulate yourself as well as possible, or you have all these great reasons, but you don't articulate them, and you come down on what's like a sort of a shaky point, you know. Like a lot of these essentially pleas to like authority and entertainment. Like, oh, but wouldn't it be a great tournament? That's irrelevant to rules.
I get it. It's an emotive issue. What you're seeing with the sort of illogical application, these illogical contradictory statements. You're seeing a brilliant person, the greatest in-game leader that has ever existed in Counter-Strike. You're seeing him let his emotions get the better of him when he says stuff like, well, we would have done this, whatever, but bloody hell, we're getting fucked out of the major. You know, it's like you say, it's an either or. But when you become emotional on any particular topic, it's very hard to sort of keep sight of, well, your choices have these consequences, your actions have these consequences. So I don't blame him. You know, the only thing that I do find upsetting is this kind of constant permutation of a storyline that they're very happy to put out, as if I am in any way prejudicial against these people, as if there is some.
It's the meme, right? The meme is it because he's Brazilian? But except that they actually aren't even memeing anymore. They legit mean it under the surface, don't they?
Yeah, I know, but it's like, you know, I think some tweets were put out and then got deleted that like, oh, E-League's always had it in for this team. It's like, it simply isn't true, you know? The hat rule wasn't about fucking anything that happened at E-League, actually, but it's a sensible rule that definitely should be implemented. You'll notice I didn't speak about that until people went ham and started saying, oh, Richard, what are you going to fucking do about it? As if I sit there coming up with new ways to fuck bald players because I'm bald myself. You know what I mean? And then there was the Luminosity to SK Gaming move where people start, you know, they were implying that, again, we were taking spots away from the players. No, we were applying the rules as they were written down once again. You know, that's how it works. And we've been consistent in the application of that rule throughout.
And then another one, just to throw it in there, is because Tempo Storm weren't invited to season 1 again, it's because they're Brazilian, apparently. Like, you know, like this is getting really tiresome because this is like a scenario where someone who does have problems in their life just keeps like pulling the race card 24/7, and everything that happens, it's like that joke. There's a Seinfeld episode where one of Jerry, obviously in the show, Jerry is Jewish in ethnicity, right, and technically religion, but he's not a religious character. And in the show, he has a character called Uncle Leo, who's his uncle, right, and he's uncle that everyone has, where you try and avoid him because they're just fucking annoying and they're just too much in their own idiosyncrasies. And his joke is that because his uncle keeps pulling the anti-Semitism card, he does it on everything though. So, you know, like the cook burns his hamburger, anti-Semite. The rabbi's just talking for too long in synagogue, anti-Semite. Like, you see the joke. It's like, you've gone too far, haven't you? You've gone down a fucking rabbit hole.
So it's like, you know, I think we've said it a bunch. It shouldn't need saying that. Obviously, this isn't about any personal preferences towards any teams. It's just the rules. It's the rules as they are written down, and we're applying the rules. And this is what happens in every tournament. And E-League has shown that no matter how big you are, or how much clout you have, or how big a fan base you can mobilize, we're not interested in anything except the application of the rules. Richard Lewis, the fan of Counter-Strike, would love to see this iteration of SK Gaming going to every tournament until they determine they want to change a player again, because they are playing some of the best Counter-Strike that's ever been played. But the rules say this, and I also support the application of rules, because you can't just think about SK Gaming in that vacuum. So like you said, you got to think about all the other teams, everybody else, all the knock-on effects, and it's just
the point is there are negatives to not having a roster lock, right?
Well, yeah, right.
But no one's bringing that up. Like, what's mad is, here's the thing. I'll at least give fair play to Lurpus on this. When I did my episode with Lurpus, he will unabashedly say, you know, like, he understands it's unfair. It's just what he wants, right? I at least give him credit for admitting it. The rest of them don't do that. They all claim, I want the rules to be really fair. And then they only talk about what would be the upside of a rule change and none the downside. So, for example, one of the reasons this rule set exists, because remember, the famous example I gave you was the one before from Astralis, where what happened was Astralis kicked out Cajun B and got Kirby from Dignitas. Now, because Dignitas had won the minor, Kirby was not eligible to play for Astralis. But Cajun B was allowed to play for Dignitas. So you might think to yourself, that's illogical, doesn't make sense, isn't that unfair? No, because that's the whole point. What they don't want is you winning a minor and then me taking your best player and therefore your team... No, the other way around. They don't want it where like SK lends Fur to fucking Immortals so they can go and romp through the Americas minor, and then they go, right, Fur, come back to our team now, mate, and do some sort of dodgy trade, or, you know, like they're trying to avoid stuff like that, because, by the way, that would happen. Like, people would do that. Oh, let's boost my friend's team. I know everyone says now it wouldn't, but this is one of the problems in life. As soon as you leave a loophole open, the person is no longer breaking a rule when they fucking abuse the loophole. We can't stop them at that point.
Yeah, and so like you say, I think it's just one of those things that's like it's blown up, and it is what it is. They're the rules. Everybody knew it. What annoys me is the fact that we went from being in a place of acceptance where everybody talked about, well, SK Gaming won a bolts at the major, you know, then they won a tournament.
It's because they won tournaments, isn't it? Let's be real.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if they hadn't won any tournaments, this isn't happening. I'm not getting completely wrecked on fucking social media.
Oh, by the way,
it's all my machinations from day one. You know?
SK themselves did not confirm that he was properly going to be there until I believe they won Blast. So they themselves were on the fence, like, is it a real move? Is it 100%?
Yeah.
Come on, man. And you're pretending like you knew that move from day one. So why are you lying to the public then? And by the way, I think here's the maddest part about all this. As usual, we get drawn into a scenario where there's only a dichotomy of 100% no roster locks or this exact set of rules. No, I agree that these, by the way, a simple way to solve this problem, in my opinion, is something that I think everyone wants. Condense the fucking major cycle. So have it so that the minors are like 2 weeks before the qualifier, then the qualifiers are a week before the major or 2 weeks before the major. There we go. Whole thing done in just about a month and a half. Therefore, all you have to know is a month and a half before if you want to make your roster move. The problem now is you had like, you know, a gap of like 3 months that you have to not make a roster move. And I agree that's probably too much. Probably doesn't fit the ins and outs of a modern day Counter-Strike team that's trying to be the best. Sure. But that's, again, down to Valve. That's nothing we can do about that.
Yeah, and like I say, you know, I'd kind of feel that this wasn't like if it hadn't been crafted in a very sort of dishonest, intellectually dishonest fashion. I haven't heard a single critique about what's going to happen with Team Liquid. Haven't heard that, right?
No emotional pleas to, but bloody hell, come on, think what it'll mean for Team Liquid to not have Steel.
Yeah. No one's, there hasn't been one.
Best part about that one, by the way, is Team Liquid even did their move after fucking all this stuff was known about bolts.
Yeah.
They have even less reason to be like, please, Valve. By the way, Team Liquid, real talk. The minors have already happened, son. I'd already be in favour. Even if they made an exception for bolts and they were like, we only played an online qualifier, I'm 100% Team Liquid not being allowed to use steel because they have not obeyed none of the concepts of the rules. So I don't know why they would even fucking put their nose up.
Yeah, and my understanding is Team Liquid, they've got to use Zeus as a stand-in. Yes. So they're not even using the player that Steel replaced, right?
Which, by the way, it's hilarious because, again, but now we're going to have to use Zeus. Why is that then? Why don't you use the player you got under contract? Yeah, but I don't want to. Again, that's your choice, isn't it, mate? You'd have here's the thing. Team Liquid's not winning the major even with Stanislaw, but they'd be a decent team. It's not my fault you're going to make yourself use Zeus.
Yeah. You know, look, I've said this. I wish what I want, and then we'll move on and we'll talk about some other shit. What I would like to see is kind of like when these problems consistently come up, I think we've all got to have a tacit understanding. You know, I can't go down the Lurpus rabbit hole. Like I've said this about Lurpus, like, you know, his thought process Basically, it's thoughts without a process. He just arrives at what he feels is the best conclusion at any moment. At least he's transparent about it, like you said, and says, this is just what I want. This is the best thing for me in the moment. This is what will give us the best Counter-Strike, the highest level, whatever his reasoning rationale is. But there isn't any process or sort of, mapped out, well, okay, but if that's what we get to, this is how we get there. Now, for me, I've said this for ages, there has to be some sort of rules around roster locks. You would have complete anarchy. What would be the point in even trying to develop a team unless you as an in-game leader or as a team owner even completely believed and had faith that that team could get to a place? And how much time would you give it if everyone else around you was like, well, money talks, we can just buy this player, that player, go to this tournament, use a ringer here, use a ringer there. This would be terrible for fans, terrible for Counter-Strike, terrible for the majors, because you would just get super teams rocking up to sell stickers, to sell merchandise, to potentially win the big prize and the prestige that your organization would sort of benefit from. The system we've got now will occasionally throw up these unfair instances, or instances rather that appear unfair because of what you want in your heart as a fan or as the lover of the beautiful game or whatever. It was like, fuck, Italia 90 when Paul Gascoigne got that yellow card, right? And it meant he wouldn't have been able to play had England won the match. Sure. And he cried, and it was super sad, and it was a national story. Oh, the tears of Gas. He still fucking kicked some cunt in the leg. He still had to have a yellow card. The ref can't just go, fucking hell, it's Gaza, isn't it?
Exactly,
but, what I mean?
But look, he's really sad. He wanted to play in the final.
Yeah.
The logic is that actually, by the way, that's actually a classic example of an unpopular rule that should exist. The reason why you have to have that rule? Because it's such an important game, for some people, the most important game of their lives. If it meant winning the game, they would fucking wreck other people with tackles. Like, if I'm playing in that's the game, I'm going straight for that fucking Muller guy, wrecking his ass. He's one of the best players in the world.
Yeah, it's like Zidane when he fucking headbutted Materazzi.
Because, by the way, that actually used to happen in some of the sports. Like, most famously, in the late 1980s, when the Chicago Bulls used to play the Detroit Pistons figured out the most cynical, unethical use of the foul rules ever. Because what they figured out was that if you do a normal foul, right, which is where you touch the guy in a way that stops him from shooting it properly, they just give the guy free throws, right? Well, two things. One, if you're going to do that, they figured out, right, what if I go a little bit further? I don't just foul him, but I make sure the shot doesn't go in. So first of all, he's only getting free throws. Secondly, if I'm going to foul him, why don't I go right up to the line of where it's the next level, which is called a technical, like an unnecessary foul, basically, and go right up to that line. If I'm going to touch him, why not punch him? So they started doing that. Every time Michael Jordan would come down the lane, 3 people would punch him in his arms. Now, if you think that's a reasonable way to play the game, bear in mind, by the way, each person can take 6 fouls. So if you start bringing fuckers off the bench, you can punch Michael Jordan 50 times in a game. If you think that's reasonable, you're mentally ill. Like, there's a reason why we have to have certain rules. I agree, it's horrible every now and then, but it's not in every scenario, is it?
No, that's the point. It probably has benefited more teams than it's like hampered. You know what I mean?
Which, by the way, is one of the best definition of a rule. Does more good than harm.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like I said, look, we all like great stories. We all want great tournaments. We all want great Counter-Strike. Yeah, like I said, when Zidane headbutted fucking Materazzi in his send-off game for France, the ref didn't go, didn't see that, you fucking shiny ball genius.
You have scored some brilliant goals, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, get up. You haven't scored any fucking bicycle kicks in an All-European Cup. You get the fuck up now.
Yeah, he didn't, that's
believe it or not, that would be bias.
Yeah, exactly. that is the point. So look, I'm as sorry as anybody else that we don't get to basically play fantasy Counter-Strike, which I'm told we can do at Duncan's YouTube channel sponsorship all the time when I watch his videos. But the reality is,
abstract, some ways, not even conducive manners to getting you to play it, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the reality is, this is the rule. This is how the rule's going to be applied. Everybody knew the rule. We accepted the rule. We were at peace with the rule. The team that knew the rule, that made the roster change, had said they were at peace with the rule and would definitely have made this change regardless. They've been talking about how they were going to have to use Phelps at the major. Our Team Liquid were going to have to use Zeus at the major. Everyone was in a good spot with it. You just because they've gone on a fucking godlike streak, you can't just then go, I retract all my earlier sensible approach. Like, fuck that. It's ridiculous. These are the rules. Right. Let's talk about SK Gaming's win, shall we? In that fucking Danish place that Anders tried to teach me how to pronounce.
Or something, right?
Yeah, but mate, he did this video, if you go on his Twitter feed, where it looks like he's on Grindr or something. He's doing this with his mouth. Like, what
the dossier video, you mean?
Yeah,
he's cosplaying dossier.
Yeah, it was just outrageous. So yeah, basically, SK Gaming had this like awesome fucking run there again. But I wanted to talk just a little bit about the format, because I've looked at the Flying DJ's tweets. He seems to be implying that they're going to change these formats.
Yeah, they actually did a news post about it, Rich. I can give you some info on that. They did a news post in which they said that for all the future ESL and IEM, like I think they even said ESL 1, so because obviously ESL 1s used to have different formats. If you remember, New York was like, 2 4-team group stage with GSL into 4-team playoff. Whereas obviously EPL and IEM have had the same format as each other, which is that they have the 2 6-team groups and you play a best of 1 round robin, and then you have the 6 teams in the playoff where 2 of them skip to the semis. The announcement that they made was that they're going to expand the size of the groups so that I believe they're going up 2 more teams in each. So I think that they're going to put it to like 14 teams at the event. So I guess a group of 7 or something. And then it's the same playoff format, which is top 3 get out into the playoffs. And the idea was they're going to unify the whole system for ESLs and make it all like that across the board.
Yeah, well, which is a good thing, because I've got a love-hate relationship with Best of Ones. I've got a love-hate relationship with Best of Ones. We're just showing people the picture of Anders sticking his fucking tongue out while we're talking. So his why I hate Best of Threes in group stages.
That's the one. Okay.
No, here's why I hate Best of Threes.
Right.
The alternative. Because obviously it's overly long. I think there's a barrier to entry for the casual fan. Very casual fan, that is, because it's like they go, oh, wow, they just won that map. Brilliant. And then it's like, yeah, but this isn't like any other sport that you're used to where you just play once and that's it. There's nothing analogous to that. You don't play a fucking... I suppose in playoff games you do have series, in basketball, baseball. They do that in American sports. But just for a group stage game, to get one victory, to have to win 2 out of 3 times, I can understand why that might be a little bit confusing. Then on top of it, logistically, we all know one of the great things about Counter-Strike, but also one of the problems is you can have these maps which are just like ridiculously attritional, and it comes down to overtime until someone slips up. And I've worked those unbelievably long days, like when I did the European minor in Romania, and we had the longest ever game on record, which finished, I don't know what the fuck it was, 54-52 or something ridiculous. And that was one map, right? So when you start trying to plan for a day as a tournament organizer and you have best of 3 in the groups, you could potentially get all 3 maps, all the overtimes. And Duncan, you've been sat in green rooms with me, and when you've had a long day and you come in the next day and you're a little bit tired, a little bit cranky, we've got to gently hand you your fucking Monster, or no, not Monster, it's Rockstar, sorry, your sugar-free Rockstar, whatever you drink, and a bag of Haribo. Just leave you alone so you don't just wreck Moses for 5 hours, as is the only thing that cheers Duncan up. Right?
True. Yeah.
No, all of this is true, by the way. This is actually true. How Duncan, when Duncan's feeling sad or depressed or tired, how he pulls himself out of that hole, that existential hole, is he just abuses Moses like he's like some little hobgoblin from Labyrinth or something. He wrecks him constantly. It's outrageous. I've never seen nothing like it. So anyway, you always say when we get into those games, of course, all 3 maps, all the overtimes, all the rounds, all the fuck this. Guess we're here for another 20 hours. Fuck this. So obviously, talent can get a little bit upset by it as well, right? Like best of three can create a logistical nightmare for
Yes.
your tournament moving forward. That being said, anyone can beat anyone else in a best of one at the elite fucking level. So what does a best of one group stage even fucking mean? It doesn't mean anything, does it? You can't. Well, everybody says the same shit when you have best of one groups. Guess we got to wait to the playoffs to see who is actually a good team. And lo and behold, a lot of the teams that get there, predicated on upsets in best of ones, as soon as they get to a best of three, shit the bed and crash out the tournament.
Well, and also what's great is just look at the exact format we're talking about. So the EPLs and the IEMs, the ones that have these 6-team best of ones. I made a video on this exact topic where I go into some of the nuanced reasons that actually go beyond normal best of one upsets. So for example, in a normal best of one upset, it's like, yeah, you're playing one map or, you know, you can win the 2 pistols. But the problem is when you play those really long best of one group stages, first of all, you're playing like maps in a row, and then you're in a scenario where you don't have time to scout what the opponent just did because you're playing your, you know, there's all these factors. Well, what's mad is logically, intuitively, you'd think you'd have more upsets in the GSL best of ones because you think, well, I only have to win one map maybe to have my upset, right? No. There's more upsets in the 6-team ones where you play more best of ones because that's how much variance fucking best of ones have. Like madly, if you give people like 5 of them, all these underdog teams routinely get out. Go and look at the last EPL and IEM playoffs, and you see the most wonky, like Envious is there. And then in this most recent one, you had obviously fucking Hellraisers, Misfits, Optic. You know, there's some really wacky results. And this is why I tell you as a format, it's just got so much variance to it. Because we all know that there are teams in that tournament who did not make the playoffs, who wouldn't have gotten absolutely rolled like Misfits did by, was it SK?
SK in the end,
yeah. Like as bad as G2 did, I think G2 won one map at EPL. They would have absolutely competed against SK way better than that. They might have won a map, you know. Like, that's part of the problem. I actually saw someone make a very good point about this, Rich, actually, which, because I always come down on this one. I always say this. First of all, I don't like best of ones because they had a lot of variance and they fuck up the playoffs, right? But I always add this caveat. There are so many tournaments that I also think if you had my dream tournament setting for every tournament, that would get a bit fucking much. Like every tournament we're playing, like you know, the winning team's playing like 8 best of 3s. That's too much. I agree. And it's too much on the viewer. So generally, I always say, let's have the best events like majors be all best of 3. And then let's have either wacky events that want to be different or lesser events. Well, someone made a good point that I actually think is a pretty solid one. I've never seen anyone make the point, which is how about have tournaments that are just best of 1?
Yeah, I mean that now it does get
you know
interesting
what I mean?
when you
that way if you get out the group, hey, now maybe your form keeps going, you roll through, you get a crazy upset. Now, yes, we'd all say quite cynically, well, it doesn't count as much because it's best of 1 tournament. Yeah, but that's kind of the point, right? It's to have an exciting tournament. Because I've always thought the ultimate flaw, and I did a video on this, is that yes, I've never debated that it's exciting when you have an upset. But what I hate is an upset where the team that goes to the playoffs is a wasted playoff series. So now because they got 2 extra rounds in a best of 1, now you have to watch a shit best of 3 that no one wants to watch, you know. Yeah,
exactly right. But yeah, so look, I gotta say, if any event did typify the problem with best of 1, it was this. It exemplified it rather. There was some teams that just made no fucking sense to me. I mean, let's start by just talking about some of the teams that absolutely shit the fucking bed, because that'll be nice and easy to just move through.
People are going to be shocked because it's some good teams.
No, this is the madness, isn't it? So North, for me, are the big shock. Because I'm not even going to mention Astralis, them going out. Like, obviously, we all want Device to get better and come back to the team. And while Astralis are using stand-ins and whatnot, and I think they've almost kind of accepted that until the major, all tournaments, they're there in intent, they're there in spirit. Apart from the Blast, obviously, where I think they wanted to win in, you know, and I know this is a Danish event as well, but that seemed more important, you know, to win to the crowd, and they, you know, they had a stand-in, it went really well. But like, I think they kind of like, let's just focus on the major. Get Device better. So that's fine. I can't criticize Astralis. North, on the other hand, fuck me. This for me underlined everything that is sort of wrong with MSL as an in-game leader.
Oh, absolutely. This was a perfect example.
Yeah, I've said this for a long, long time. That MSL, right, in that massive fucking 5-head of his, there is a brilliant brain. Right, he is incredibly intelligent. He is good at developing players. He is good at putting together winning teams. He's a great and fierce competitor when he wants to be. But his mind is also riddled with so many idiosyncrasies and flaws that the idea that he could, like, he will always sort of be in the shadow of a Carrigan, a Fallen. You know, like, he could be so much more. But at this stage, I don't think you will ever, you know, fix these issues. So obviously, in a best-of-1 series, some of these drafts have got to be spot on. Right?
You're going to like this. Like, keep going. I've got a great one.
No.
Just set it up.
Just jump in. So I'm just going to say, like, drafts are super important in best-of-1s, obviously, and we know that MSL has this thing where he just hates cash. He wants it out of the map pool. He's always hated the map. He's made no effort to ever learn it, ever put a team together on it. Just rejects the map existence entirely, right? But here's the thing. That would be great if you were a mastermind on every other map. Isn't, right? But certainly they've got their strengths and their weaknesses. Now, some of the vetoes he did here, some of the vetoes were absolutely abysmal. But yeah, go on.
Yeah. Oh, no, this is the point I'm going to make. Here's what's great. Sometimes life just lines up so perfectly. So before this actual event, I had recorded a video called North Doesn't Exploit Their Map Pool. And the central premise of the video was North actually have, for a team that's not like a top 4 team in the world, a ridiculously good map pool. They can literally play 6 maps and they have 1 permaban. So what's mad is you look at it and you go, why aren't they winning more maps? And one of the reasons you find is because even their best maps, they keep playing against the teams that can beat them. Yeah. And then they refuse to ever exploit vetoes to get maps against weaker teams that they wouldn't like. So here's what I'll do, because there's only 5 games in this tournament. So I'll run through it very quickly for you.
Well, the first one that stands out, SK Gaming, we'll play them on Overpass, shall we?
Yep. So this is how it goes, right? Yeah. So remember, in this format, you have 3 bans.
Yeah.
Right. And you can play 6 maps. Think about it. You can figure it out there, guys. You can play 6 maps. You have 3 you can ban. So against SK Gaming, let's go into overwhelmingly their best map, Overpass. Lose that heavily. Next up, I've got Misfits, underdog team that hasn't got that much LAN experience against top teams. I don't know, why don't we go straight into Cobblestone, arguably their best map? Oh, what's that? We've lost. By the way, yes, one of North's best maps, arguably North's best map. But why are you wasting your time against an inexperienced team? Why don't you go to all like the 3 maps they're fucking be rocky on and they won't expect you to play? Let's keep going. Then they play against NRG. Mirage is NRG's best map. Do you see the fucking pattern that is coming here? Let's keep going. Against Optic, Overpass. Overpass is like Optic's second best map. Can you do the maths there? Optic, there's 6 maps that we're going to have to potentially do. We're going to ban cash ourselves, so we've got 2 bans left. Let's somehow, with 2 bans remaining, manage to get on their second best map. How the fuck are you doing this? It's like
I know, and they actually beat Optic there, which is crazy because Optic would have topped the group if they'd beaten North.
The only one that they didn't do a stupid veto on was actually Nip, believe it or not.
Yeah. Which was, he got an
Madness.
NIP on Inferno. But here's the thing though. This is the other thing I want to add. MSL believes that Nip have voodoo powers over him. He
believes in Nip magic. He's been listening to me too much.
No, he really does though. He really believes in it. He thinks that when we talk about stylistic matchups and how there's the way 2 teams play a game can create great matchups, even though one might be incredibly better than them on paper, And this is a phenomenon that's existed for as long as Counter-Strike has. So he believes that NIP have this stylistic hoodoo over them. And every time it gets to crunch time with NIP, he just thinks they're going to get wrecked by NIP. And this has happened historically. If you look at MSL's teams, whenever they played, and I think this goes back to the Western Wolves days almost. I think you just got PTSD from those times. Yeah. But, they get into an overtime with them, which, if I remember rightly, they shouldn't have been in that situation anyway, and they capitulated in overtime. But then think about back at the Blast. The North's heaviest loss.
Oh, they got shit on.
Yeah, they got absolutely shit on by NIP, 16-2 on fucking Train, right? I mean, this is what I mean. North, for me, like, look, that is a fucking brilliant roster. That is a great roster. There was even an argument when they were having that great run of form, and Astralis had dipped just before Dupree came out of his hole, and started like playing the best fucking CS he's ever played out of their hole. Yeah, well, he was all up in their hole, no doubt, right? But again, think about it, right? North always have a great matchup with Astralis, bizarrely, even when Astralis are meant to be the superior team. So there was an argument for a time that North were the best team in Denmark, which if you think about how good Denmark is as a region and the abundance of talent, what a fucking accolade that is, right? And MSL has no fear against Glaive, someone who he's played with, someone who he's known since the days of Counter-Strike Source. Zero fear going up against him. He actually thinks he's got his number, right? So what is going on with North? The answer is simple. It's MSL who's got to have a hard look at himself and be introspective. I mean, I'm not even going to bring up his statistics at these Pro League Season 6 finals because they were dog shit. I will always give great in-game leaders a pass on that front. I will always do it. But the vetoing was terrible. The tactics obviously weren't great because you went onto these maps and it's not like you had anything special. You were always, even on NRG's best map, North should beat NRG. Even on Misfits' best map, North should beat Misfits. Didn't happen that way. And it's MSL who's got to look at himself about this. Now, I will say he tweeted out on the last day of the tournament in a rare moment of lucidity and clarity. He said, wow, I couldn't believe how bad we were this event or something. But the spirit is really high in the team. And we know we can work on it. And like he said, even though we did terrible, we're feeling really good. Excellent. I hope that means that you're going to sit down and actually look at yourself and not the global conspiracy, the NIP, conspiracy, all these other things that you've got a tummy bug, whatever it is that always has sort of held you back. I hope the fact that we're seeing them get absolutely smashed and MSL tweeting positively, that means for once he's going to look within, because it all stems from him, in my opinion. Pretty much all of North's failings are MSL's creation.
I hate to rain on your parade and give you a spoiler. It ain't going to happen because, unfortunately, MSL is the ultimate example of the person who does that every time. Like, famously, at the end of their one with Megas, when it was going really badly in most tournaments, they'd actually stopped even making playoffs, and then they had that, all right run to top 8 at the major. They would still tweet after their losses. Like, famously, he had an argument with Lopez where he was like, actually, Megas is doing his role fine, and this is a real team finally, and I'm really happy with it, while they were in some of their worst results. So the problem I have with this is I think MSL goes away, and the first thing that happens is he notices this stat that apparently they went 2 to 15 in pistol rounds over the last couple of events, and he goes, that's it, pistol rounds. If we win more pistols, we win more games. Back to the old madness of doing the same things over and over again while praying for a different outcome. And the problem with all of this, right, this is what makes it so tough for me, is that in a weird way, MSL can only look this, I won't say stupid, I'll say inefficient. He can only look this inefficient because of all his positive qualities. I think if you took any other in-game leader and gave him exactly this squad, I think they would do less than he did. If you gave Snappy this squad, I don't know that he'd be that great with it. MSL's done a lot of great things with how he structures squads, how he brings up the young talent. He's done some amazing things. Unfortunately, he always gets himself to the same point, and then his weaknesses take over because his strengths have taken you as far as he can go. And this is a hallmark of all truly great teams. Your strength gets you to the top, and your weaknesses are what decides whether or not you will win the tournaments and whether you'll be consistent. So, for example, to give a slight spoiler for when we talk about FaZe, FaZe is just the extreme version of that because they're the most ridiculous example ever of a team that had a plan A and no plan B, but they just have the best plan A you could ever imagine. So, amazingly, plan A can still get you to the final, which is kind of outrageous. Normally that's the whole point. Plan A only gets you so far. Then you've got to be able to do comebacks and plan a map you're not good on and do all these factors that they don't do. But the problem is when you don't have the luxury of having Nico and Guardian and fucking Rain in your team, and you've got good players, Now it's like when NIP won Auckland, everything's got to go right for you to win. You can't have any little gaps, and especially not ones that are like systemic and other people, as in the case of these teams we're talking about, are taken advantage of. Like Misfits are literally sat at home going, like, probably fucking laughing. Like, you remember that scene in Curb Your Enthusiasm where Larry David and like Jeff, his lawyer, are looking at that book at that party of like all diseases and cancers and stuff, and they're just crying, laughing like, that's like, take that fucking screenshot and just put in Sean Gares' face when it's like MSL's allowed the veto to go to Cobblestone, and he's just like, that's exactly what I wanted, you fucking idiot, look at his massive head. The thing about your forehead, MSL, it's a game of inches. And I think if you look at that guy next to you, you'll find some motherfucker who's willing to run up those inches with me. Hoo-ah! Wrong movie, but whatever. I kept the reference going.
No, it was
See,
good.
the thing about you, MSL, is
Pacino.
you got a great ass, but you got your head shoved all the way up in the vetoes.
Yeah, man. I tell you, I just love the fact that Al Pacino just came out like this year or something it was, or it might have been at the end of last year, and said his character from Heat was on cocaine the entire time. Michael Mann, who the script director, he said definitely wasn't like.
Wait a minute.
So yeah, NIP, like since winning Oakland, it's been the same old story really, which is they win a tournament, everything goes right. You're like, bloody hell. Maybe it's finally clicked. NIP are going to be back. And then the next two tournaments subsequently, just nothing really going on. Now, again, obviously, this is all through the prism of it being best of ones. But if ever there was a team, if ever there was a roster with people that really perhaps shouldn't succumb to defeats in a best of one scenario, you would say it would be NIP, right? But they actually didn't have a particularly good run here. And I looked at their group, and for me, while I actually felt North wouldn't get through, I thought that the top three would be SK, Optic, and NIP, with NIP probably above Optic.
Oh, by the way, can we just say a very brief point? We're not going to make a big point about it. But one thing that I liked about this tournament was, right, I get mad triggered by the fact that another factor of why I hate online play is because then when you get wacky results in online play, it means that you then seed the groups based on that, and you get groups like, for example, ECS Season 4, one of the most outrageous group seeds that I've ever seen, where Group B is fucking insanely hard and Group A is an absolute joke. Whereas at this tournament, the reason why these groups, go look at them now, these groups are as even as they get when you take into context the standings, because they actually used a different format this time. They used this format where basically you go by the seeds, but then what you do is you pick a team for the opposing group. So because you are both incentivized to make the other group as hard as possible, to make your group easier, it means actually you end up accomplishing the task of making both groups even, as long as you don't have complete cretins in one of the groups. So these groups are fucking banging absolutely even as fuck, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, no doubt.
There was no easy group in this one,
No, sure, but obviously the best of one thing kind of like does cancel it out a little.
Sure,
bit.
yes.
Yeah. But yeah, so NIP, I mean, it's kind of just a continuation of what we said on the last show. It's like they've just gone back to being really, really flat and same issues. Like nobody's really clicking, nobody's hitting those level of performances at the same time. And if you looked at like some of the results that they had, again, they lost games that I was kind of like, really? Like how the fuck does how do you lose to these teams? I mean, like fair enough with NIP, but a 16-14 loss against NRG on Overpass was like, what the fuck is going on there? And it was again, Exist had a pretty poor game in that one. But nobody really shone, except Draken, bizarrely, was very consistent in landing his shots, and we all know you do need a good AWP player on that map. But yeah, didn't really. So I was like, watching these games coming in. I watched NRG be competitive there against NIP. Obviously, they lose to SK. It's not really a surprise. Once again, played them on Overpass. So SK Gaming just loving life, getting the map that they are. Yeah, the dominant force on.
You know what's mad about this, right? Is like, okay, so everyone will probably be aware I like the team Astralis. Now, after the first 3 months of Astralis being really good, every team in the world was like, right, Never play them on train for the first few months. Right, Overpass is their best map now. Never playing that again. So hence, the part of the reason why Astralis went downhill is every opponent they ever played in these best of threes, etc., was just only ever letting them play on maps like Mirage, Inferno, making it more questionable. I'd love to be SK. I'm the best team in the world. I've won 2 of the last 3 events. What are we getting in the group stage? Oh, our best map all the time. Sound.
Yeah. Where the veto got really strange in that one was like I don't even, it started out well, because like the way the veto works is you get first removal and the next team gets to take 2 out, right? So SK Gaming are loving not going first in that sense because they immediately get to take out Nuke and Inferno, which is, if you can get SK Gaming onto Inferno, they're beatable. They're never even going to play you on Nuke. So obviously they just get rid of their only weaknesses are gone immediately in a veto. But that being said, there's a world of difference between playing SK Gaming on Overpass and playing SK Gaming on Cobblestone. And NIP, they're a decent team on Cobblestone. They're not bad. They've innovated tactics on that map in the past. We called them the NIP smokes. They took Cobblestone out as their next ban.
Oh, the most bizarre part, Rich, is that the 3 maps that should logically be remaining once you get through all the bans and you get down to the last phase of banning, right? 3 maps that should be available, if you think it from the SK side, because you're going to ban out Nuke, obviously. You're going to ban out Inferno, and you're probably going to ban Cash. So the 3 maps that are remaining, assuming NIP bans as usual, something like Mirage, is going to be... Oh, you're going to ban Inferno as well. The maps that will be remaining are Cobblestone, Train, and what did you say? Cobblestone, Train, and Overpass. Yeah. Right? Of those maps, the only one NIP doesn't want to be playing against SK is Overpass. You find on the other 2, Train and Cobble, that's money. Those are really good maps for you, and they can play them as well. And you go to the one that you probably can't play.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing. Like, I mean, even if you remove Train and Overpass, Cobblestone for me was the obvious one to leave dangling in there. I think you can, a team like NIP can get at SK on that one. SK should still win. They're still favourites in my opinion, but that should be a much more competitive game. You cannot no team in the world can throw SK Gaming Overpass. None of them. That's
why, I mean, again, we'll get into this later, but... People might think to themselves, well, why are you saying FaZe could beat SK on Overpass? Because if SK didn't exist, we'd be like, my God, can anyone play Overpass like FaZe? That's how like FaZe is literally the second best team in the world on Overpass, and they're getting bodied by fucking SK. So no one can fuck with them on that map right now.
Yeah, and I wonder if it had something to do with them getting spooked a little bit because they had that like really close 16-14 win over Optic on Cobblestone. Maybe I don't know if they like suddenly had a crisis of confidence in the map, thinking, well, if we're playing Optic close, but I mean Optic really, solid Cobblestone team, no doubt.
There's also the fact that in the semi-final at Auckland, they did win Overpass inexplicably against SK. But true. That's a classic example, by the way, of like, by the way, that's what NIP's done forever. The reason why the exist vetoes are so wacky is if he ever gets a win over a top team on their best mate, he thinks, right, it shows we're way better. It's like, it doesn't, does it? You know what variance is, mate? Like, the point is, would it happen 4 times out of 5? No, don't do it then. Because the funny thing is, I actually did a video. There's one I just released just before we went live with this, which is about this topic. It's the fact that basically NIP, if you believe what happened to Auckland, that's fool's gold. Because I actually looked it up. So since the player break, they've played 5 LANs. Over those 5 LANs, they've won something like, I think it was like 20 maps, and I think they've lost 17. So not, just above 50% win rate, like 53% win rate, right? That becomes quite obvious as to NIP's real level if you say that, right, so 5 LANs, 20 map wins. 9 of them came at IEM Auckland.
Yeah.
Like almost half of their map wins were 1 LAN. So if you know that, there's a reason why the term outlier exists in statistics. Like if you wanted to get a reasonable level idea of NIP, you take out the IEM Auckland one and look at the other 4 tournaments, and you have a team that's not bad, sometimes make the playoffs, sometimes won't, can beat the odd good team, can also lose to the Enviouses and the NRGs of the world, really up and down, and you kind of just hoping everything comes together. So that's reasonable.
The one thing that was an anomaly, and I guess we'll segue into talking about the teams that did well at this event now, was the Misfits game, because I actually thought NIP played the veto pretty smart. They took Misfits took Train away from NIP. Misfits don't play a lot of that, haven't looked good on it when they have. And then NIP hit them with the Mirage and the Cobblestone removal. So that's it, right? Misfits should be pretty much neutralized at that point. there's nowhere for them to go. And when Overpass came out, well, I was like, well, this is NIP all day, you know? But
and by the way, here's all I need to tell you about this game.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I was to say, right, after Auckland, something like, you know what, I actually think NIP has, like, all right players, but they don't have the craziest fraggers, right? Sean Gares top fragged this game with 105 ADR. Now, I think I've made this point in the past, but Sean Gares, of all the great in-game leaders, is, in my opinion, the worst ever mechanical player of the great in-game leaders. You know, if I made a list, top 20 in-game leaders in CSGO, he's the bottom in terms of individual ability.
He's like the fucking Mekon from Dan Dare, just flying around on that disc with like no arms. You know?
Like, for all the shit we talk about MSL, MSL will fucking outperform Sean Gares mechanically.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Worry about it.
I think that's fair.
You know? Like, I think Sean Gares and God B for me are the two that, like, you know, you can just almost bank on them having like the 9-kill game, but potentially still winning you the game with the brilliant strats and the great read of the game. So
exactly,
if he's top fragging the game against you, you've got some issues in your squad.
No, but here's what I will say. I mean, he does 1 in 100 games. This will happen, right? But I don't even think this was necessarily about Sean Gares suddenly like finding that 1 in 100 game. Like, a lot of his frags were coming from like really smart reads, rotations, you know, shooting people in the back. Like, tactically, this was a great example of Sean Gares' value.
Smart reads. What sort of like Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace?
No.
Reference game on point.
Yeah, not bad. But like overall, I mean, Misfits were impressive. What I thought was impressive was Devaduvek and Amanek having this is like the first time I've seen them at a big LAN. With international caliber opponents. They definitely showed they could hang in this kind of company. The only game they looked out of their depth was the SK one. Well, you know, that happens to everyone when you play SK. If you're not playing SK on a regular basis, if you're not an elite level player in your own right, you're going to get wrecked by them. That's what they do. They pick you apart, you know. Sean Gares, as I said, I thought the games they were winning, like, he was a difference maker, not in terms of what he did on the scoreboard, but like I say, there were so many moments where, you know,
he's a brilliant in-game leader.
Yeah, they won. They won. They won, like, you know, through stacks. You know, they were able to you know, have early rotations, early reads. Like, say, he himself in the NIP game, for example, was just getting lots of kills where he was just in the right place at the right time. This is all somebody who is literally, you know, seeing the fucking, you know, all the composite parts of the game. But that being said as well, Shazam, dude, like, Shazam's legit a fucking good player, dude. Like, I don't think he gets the respect he deserves. I think obviously he's been involved in a lot of stuff in the past, which like makes people want to discredit him as a player, want to dislike him as a player. People remember the Cloud9 Shazam we had with Sean Gares, which didn't work out. But actually, his performance here as a primary AWPer, I mean, he was fucking great. Like, really, really good. He had numerous rounds where he was a difference maker in the sense that he would pick up 2-3 kills, quick succession, turn around on its head. And I actually think Sean Gares has kind of been vindicated a little bit by sticking with him. We used to make the joke. That it was like some mad fucking Brokeback Mountain kind of thing going on with Shazam and Sean Gares. Like, I can't quit you, Shazam. You know, because when Sean Gares like threw in and said, I'm going to go to make rosters with this guy, we were like totally fucking perplexed. Like, we thought Shazam must have a swan neck like no one else in the business, right? But it turns out, actually, Sean once again
matched
was right.
Only by AZ from North, presumably.
Yeah, no doubt, right?
Who gets fucking busy with the fire horse.
But
Timestamp that.
But Shazam has like just been, I would say, online, especially Misfits' best player by a country mile, and at this LAN was right up there. But the French players actually threw in a little bit here as well. So I was super impressed by Misfits. Sure, the best of one, you know, the best of one format definitely helped them, and they were never going to beat SK Gaming. But I still think Misfits actually really overperformed and went past expectations here, and they did it by everybody pretty much having brilliant level performances that actually make me excited about what they're going to do if they can get to another international tournament.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, in terms of Sean Gares, he has always been a very good in-game leader, except 2016. And funnily enough, he even addressed this actually in an interview I saw. It was on Cybersport, that ES Force owned site, which, by the way, has actually got some pretty good writers and has done some good work, I have to say. And in this interview, he basically said that when he joined Echo Fox, he even joined it with the express, like, sort of conditions that were like, well, you know, I'm not going to be able to practice much and I'm sort of transitioning to the next phase of my career, which might mean, you know, analysis or coaching or whatever it might be. Yep. And he sort of joined and they were sort of saying like, oh, no, just give us a good year or whatever. And then he said that the problem he had was it's kind of like once he got in the actual game, though, he was like, oh, I've changed my mind. Actually, this fucking sucks that we're losing. Even if I can't practice much, I don't want to lose. So then he even says, like, he blames himself for essentially thinking, right, well, since I don't want to lose, I've got to make some roster moves. And he made moves where, you know, there was limited options as to what they could do. So if you remember, they got Rix and they got Freakazoid and they got a lineup that wasn't any good, let's be real. And he had Shazam as well, but at least Shazam, actually, I can at least see the logic of why you might have him in a lineup. But the rest of the lineup was terrible. Like, that team was never going to do anything. It's the one that famously, I said dollar for dollar, because famously they actually got paid very well. Dollar for dollar, one of the worst teams ever, because the accomplishments were non-existent. Now that he's in Misfits, and obviously via TSM, where he went again with the idea that when he joined TSM, he told Reginald, oh, I'm in it fully now, I want to be a player again. The point is, this is Sean Gares motivated again. And I agree, he doesn't have the best talent. Like, he's got nowhere near the talent of a Team Liquid or Cloud9. But look what he's doing with the talent he does have. Like, some of these players, like, I know because they're having results now, people are going to think they're all good players. That Devo Dueck, if he was back in France, would be doing nothing. He's not even that sick in this team. He's just all right. Yeah. Amanek is a revelation. Okay, we'll give you that one. He definitely has come into his own. And I have to say, the way Sean Gares is using him seems like it's fucking spot on. Shazam's up and down always, but I definitely agree with you. He has always been an underrated player and hard done by. In this context, I've always given this analogy because I think it holds pretty well. For me, Shazam and Cadian are two players who have exactly the same problem. If they just couldn't talk, if they were mute, they'd have been in way better teams years ago. Like, their level's pretty decent. They're not star players. They're not superstar players. They're never going to be in the best team in their country. But they're good, serviceable players who can do their job, perform on LAN. The problem is both of them, in their respective scenes, have had either attitude problems or just gotten off the wrong foot politically with everyone. And therefore, they get resigned to just playing with shit teams or teams where it's like, there's one guy, I'll have me in the team, you know. So they're actually playing in teams that are worse than their actual level should be. And they should have a more of a chance. But that's life, you know. That is part of the game, is the politics and how you work with your team. So I think overall, I agree. I don't look at this and go, oh, imagine what Misfits can do now. I go, cool story. It's amazing you did that much even with this lineup. Obviously, you had a little bit of help by Hellraisers coming out like fucking second or whatever it is out the other group, rather than being SK or something, you know. Yeah, that obviously helped you get your top 4 place in. Great performance for everyone. But yeah, I think it's unreasonable to expect this Misfits team to be some top level team. I don't even think they'll become a top NA team. I don't think that's reasonable. You know?
No, I don't think that's reasonable either. But I'll just add as well, a lot of people were sort of falsely putting this out there, like, oh, Sean's married now, he doesn't put the work in. Motherfucker still grinds them demos, grinds them stats.
Yeah.
Oh, it would. If I was Sean, this is how you know what a fucking model pro Sean Gares is like, right? Like, all these motherfuckers on social media talking, he's married now, he's fucking done, he doesn't put the effort in. That motherfucker still grinds demos, grinds hours, grinds deathmatch, comes with a fucking playbook. I know this. I talk to the fucking players.
Got a great piece of information for you as well, because it's something I asked him in my Reflections interview that I did with him. So I actually naively misread him as a person. I actually have more respect now that I know this. Right, there's a great concept, right, that people who are like insanely dedicated, it's actually true. Some of them either learn to love it, or some of them are incredibly lucky and they actually just love working hard. Like one of the most famous examples I could give you is Kobe Bryant, right? One of the most dedicated players ever, to go in the gym, working on his shot. Even like, 18 years in the league, he'd be working on some new move to add to his repertoire in the off season. When other players, when you're already been the MVP, you're like, right, I'll just stick with what I've got, right? And part of the thing is, when people would ask him, why do you work so hard? He actually said, it's literally what I like to do the most. Like, he said the analogy for him was, to other people when they're eating their dinner, they don't want to eat the broccoli or the vegetables, right? They're like, oh, but I better do it because it's good. Yeah. He said, for me, it's like if I actually liked the broccoli, and that's the main thing I want to eat. Well, in that scenario, right, I naively thought, because of Sean Gares' history and his specialty for studying games, reading opponents, I thought, right, you know what? He's like me with like historical stuff. He just loves to do that. He legit loves to just get down, hunker down, start doing research, go through all the shit. And I said to him, oh, you know, so do you really love it? Do you like enjoy what you think? He goes, no. It's horrible. Like, I hate having to watch loads of fucking demos and go through it all. So the fact that he then still does it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beyond the Call of Duty as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Oh, dude, like, again, like, think about him as a guy. Like, he's got his fucking life sorted, right? He's been on some of the most successful NA teams, always been well salaried, great ambassador for the game, like 0 fucking blemishes in his copybook. I don't even count that Reginald bullshit, because there's still a bunch about that people don't fucking know and whatever, right? It'll never come out because there's fucking NDAs these days, you know what I mean? That's that, right? So, you know, his majesty...
Rich, me and you played both sides of the media on that.
No, I know. This is the funny thing as well. I remember seeing on social media going, oh, Thorin and Richard will hate each other now. Just, you know, fuck no. You know, we had access to different people, different information.
Here's the funny thing, Richard. This is a classic example, actually, of where you don't in any way have to violently disagree to have different perspectives.
Absolutely not. Of course not.
As you noted on a show, that one of these shows that we did here, in general, because I have noticed that there is no voice for like tournament organizers.
Yeah, exactly.
Teams. I have taken it upon myself to try and be that voice and to put forward their perspective and to interview them in a manner where they can explain themselves, because I just noticed that everyone was on the bandwagon of like, it's just about the players and stuff. And listen, someone needs to speak for the players, but everyone needs a voice and everyone needs their points.
Absolutely on point.
I think that's a good approach if we can make sure that we're taking a balanced perspective on the whole industry.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and
your beat, everyone has their beat, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I talked to, you know, I obviously talked to Sean, you know, quite a bit, but like I say, he is somebody who, when he was thinking, well, fuck it, you know, after the Echo Fox stuff, maybe I got to go and start the new chapter, you know, he reached out and I was like, dude, like, you can have no problem being on a desk, you know, you could be the next great analyst to come through, you know.
Speaking of which, Rich, this killed me. In the interview he did, he talked about his Echo Fox period, right? And in Echo Fox, remember, it was 2016. At the very end of 2016 was when Echo Fox had gone down the pan and he was still figuring out, like, am I going to go to TSM? Yeah. And he mentions, right, because the thing is, at ECS Season 2, the one that Astralis won over Optic right after E-League, he mentions that he did analysis there because he actually was one of the desk analysts with, like, Lurpus and Yanko, and he mentions that he did it for free. At the end of 2016, he willingly, for free, did a whole LAN and doing analysis. Like,
what a fucking legend.
I don't know what sort of, like, fucked up thing in this guy's brain he thinks altruism is, but that's not altruism. That's just getting straight turned out, motherfucker. You were literally just hanging off fucking James Bardolph's pocket walking around the yard. Tell us about that.
I love the idea of James Bardolph as teabag. You being fairly wise, but pound foolish, Sean Gares. Ain't that right, my pretty? So anyway, so basically the guy's a fucking legend. He could be anything he wants, do anything he wants, and he's hanging in there, developing this fucking talent, which no fucker had ever heard of. You know, Amanek, sure, he was #1 ranked guest or whatever the fuck.
Obviously, I'm saying, hey, I thought I was the neck. Not bad.
You're killing me. Oh, fuck.
You got a great neck, and I'm in there in every team we're in. Timestamp everything.
Oh, fuck, dude. This is hurting. Right, anyway. So, yeah, shout out to Sean Gares. Now, one team that we definitely haven't given as much plaudits to, I mean, I believe my quote was, fuck that team. They'll never do anything.
This is by any chance?
Certainly it's Hellraisers. That's Hellraisers with just Angel, basically. And sure, you might say Woxic, I suppose, if you follow, you know, Pug Stars. Like, you famously said,
allegedly.
Dead Fox is the worst Fox, which is saying something. Issa, obviously, as well, and Fetched or Fedged. from fucking Estonia. This team just shouldn't be anywhere. It shouldn't even exist in any conventional sense. Geographically, it makes no sense. Branding it wise, it makes no sense. Yet they were able to pick up some pretty fucking decent results here. Again, caveat being they were, in a group that had, obviously Liquid and Astralis both using stand-ins and Hellraisers wrecked Liquid on Inferno, but whatever, it's Liquid with a stand-in. Got a result against Astralis on fucking Overpass, which was mad, even with Astralis using a stand-in. But yeah, I mean, they were able to get to the later stages of the tournament, despite having a bit of a shaky start. Got a win over Fnatic on Inferno. Picked up some good best of one results. And honestly, the series with Misfits, I remember, I think, I can't remember what time of day it was, but I was in bed anyway. I remember getting up for it, and I was like, well, this is going to be one of the worst series of Counter-Strike of all time. Like, obviously, you can't really get excited for it, even if you're a fan of Counter-Strike, Hey, everyone, want to come watch your best of 3 Counter-Strike series? Yeah, Richard, who is it? Misfits and Hellraisers. Nah, I'm out. Sorry, lad, sorry. I'm going to go over here and, drink bleach or something, right? But actually, the first map on Cobblestone was fucking sick. And the Overpass game, Misfits looked very good in it. But I don't know, like... Do we need to maybe give Hellraisers a bit more credit? Is this all about Angel? Is he like the Sean Gares in this scenario?
Here's the thing. Like, first of all, I think if you look at this scenario, you have to give Angel some credit at the outset that he's taken 2 different lineups of players who had no business ever having big results. So with this lineup, he's gotten top 6 at like a pretty decent big LAN. You remember with the old Hellraisers lineup earlier in the year, you got top 4 at that fucking Star Series that was mega stacked and beat North to do it. Yeah. So these are totally different sets of players. And think of the group he's recruiting from. He's recruiting players from like fucking Balkan countries that you've never heard of. Slovakia, Czech Republic. Then he's going over now. He's recruiting people from Estonia, Jordan, etc. These aren't Counter-Strike countries, and he's getting these results. So first and foremost, I think part of it for me is if you have a look, that guy, it doesn't matter what level he plays at. Every tournament he plays at, the guy frags like a monster. He's such a good fragger for in-game leader. Yeah. But the other caveat is I don't think he's a Sean Gares, because as far as I know from having read a lot of interviews and talked to players who were on Hellraisers, apparently a big thing that changed, which made those lineups good, is when they brought in that guy Jonta to be their coach, who's an old school guy who was actually like a player with Angel in 1.6. And as far as I know, he's the guy who's got like the strategical mind. So as we've mentioned on past shows with Threat and Exist or other teams along those lines, nowadays it's not always about like just the great in-game leader. Yeah, Godby and Sean Gares are so unique they can just do it themselves. But it's like, what is your combo of your coach and your in-game leader? Because in an ideal world for me, the coach and in-game leader are different types of leader. So for example, Glaive doesn't need someone to tell him tactically what's happening. He doesn't want someone coming in and going, I think you should do this. Like Glaive has got that. I got this for me. You leave it. But if you can come in and be the guy where, for example, Glaive, if you ever talk to him, not a super social guy, not a guy who has a lot of charisma. So if you can have a guy like Zonic, who is a bona fide motherfucking legend and one of the nicest guys you'll meet, if you can have him as your coach, he can bring a whole element of support network to the team and he can encourage me. You see what I mean? Like, to me, what's clever about the Hellraisers approach is one of the only strengths they have is they have this really strong fragging in-game leader, and then they've got this tactical coach, and they're on the same page. If you can get that basis, now you can start plugging in pieces and maybe get better results. With all that said, if this is your best ever result, you're not a good team, obviously. Like, it's unreasonable to think anything can happen. But give credit where credit's due,
Yeah, no, here's what I do want to say. Like, I remember when they first picked up this, and there was like the HLTV post. I think it was like in one of the very early shows when we relaunched this podcast. I went, "You're picking up motherfuckers from Jordan. What you do? Who's this guy? Etc." Like, obviously, this guy, I thought he was probably Hellraiser's best player overall as they went through the best of ones. And here's what I want to say. So first of all, mad respect and credit to that. And obviously, sometimes you do indulge yourself in the easy jokes when you're doing a podcast that's got to be entertaining and informative. And it was a bit disrespectful of me to kind of like use him in that way. So will go the other way now, right?
I mean, you were being facetious, obviously. You didn't claim you've watched every game he played. By the way, just as a little side note, just to show you...
There was nothing to watch.
Just to show you the hypocrisy that most people have. So when people claim that I just say things based on who I like and who likes me, by the way, here's a little fun detail for you. Never had a conversation with Jonte in my life, never met Jonte in my life, maybe walked past him in my life once. He's a guy where actually on Twitter, before he had all these results, flamed me massively. And when I made that video about like how bad Mouse was like, how dare this person be hired to events or whatever. So by the way, actively has endangered my career and been quite rude about me. Doesn't change the fact that if I actually think he did legit good work, give him credit for that.
Yeah, and he has. But like I said, back to Issa, I thought this player, like, you know, there's a potential here to be sort of bigger than just sort of playing on Hellraisers, because for years people have been trying to crack this part of the world. You know, Jordan and all its neighboring countries, obviously Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, you know, all of that stuff. People have been trying to get Counter-Strike as a region, you know, as that region, trying to get, you know, Counter-Strike goodness out of it. You had ESL that had an event out there, right? But on top of that, if you go all the way back to CGS, there was actually a franchise that never launched. It was completely unofficial. It was going to be one of the expansion teams if CGS took off. It was called Dubai Mirage, and it was a franchise that never existed. It had 5 players from that region, one of which was a guy called Nordy, who went on to be a manager. Yes. And yeah, you remember
Vitriolic
him?
Guy, right?
Yeah, Vitriolic. Yeah. So basically, for the longest time, people have been trying to get stuff out, you know, good stuff out of that region. It's not as if Counter-Strike isn't. It's not unheard of there. People play it in LAN cafes. People play it in their homes. You do have people, you know, I've bumped into players from Saudi Arabia playing on massive ping on like fucking European servers and stuff. There is talent in that region that's never got out. And I think it's kind of like important when a player that does kind of come out of there and actually does ascend into the lower echelons of that kind of pro scene, which is where Hellraisers are, you know, I know. I just think it's a good thing. I think he's got the potential to kind of like be a flagship player in that sense. And he definitely showed at this tournament that he can hang unbelievably well. You know, he had some very, very good games, sure, isolated to best of ones.
Like, this might sound like a harsh point, but I always tell people this, right? If anyone looks at like my overall skill set, for example, or my knowledge in the game, and they're like, right, I can see certain flaws here. There's nothing I can do about those. I already work way more hours than a normal full-time job, multiple games. And the games I do cover, what I try to do is be an expert about the players I'm going to see the most. I'm incredibly practical and pragmatic about that. So, for example, I always say this. Even if I had the time to go watch an ESL Pro League match between LDLC and Hellraisers, I wouldn't do it. I would go back and I would rewatch a game like TSM versus Virtus Pro from 2015 and go, oh, now that I've got this knowledge now and I go back, does it change how I evaluate it? You know, I would do that. So in this setting, right, when I say about all these players that we've only seen play one LAN or they've just gotten into the scene, when we write off most of them, that's just because that's the pragmatic thing to do. The majority of them will not make it. They will fail, as in every talent industry, by the way, that's about performance. The majority of them won't make it, whether that be for multiple reasons. It's big fish in a small pond syndrome. Can't handle it on stage. Takes them years to get the right teammates to be used in the right way. Whatever it is, odds are the majority, like 9 out of 10 or more in each scenario, won't make it. So it's actually more pragmatic to just be like, until the guy makes it, I'm just going to go ahead and say, not that fussed, you know. So if he ends up doing it, if he has a few more lands and he does it, or maybe he even goes to another team and is really good, then we will start to ramp it up. And then, yes, there might be a lag, but we will catch up entirely. We're not unfair to these players. It's just it would be unreasonable to expect us to watch, like, you know, the third best Brazilian team and scout every player on. Like, no, this is not going to happen, is it?
Yeah, there's not enough hours in the day.
And by the way, I'm absolutely being honest. Yes, I am ignorant about these players. That's a fact.
Yeah. So, because I'm conscious of time, let's talk about Optic. I think Optic were another surprise element at this tournament. Optic, for me, I've said that I felt they could click and they could do something. It's a bit of a weird situation over at Optic because, you know, we all saw those leaks where it was like, oh, HS is going to be out of the team. And I think that would have been talked about. That was already on the rumor mill. But they were so close to kind of going deep in this that and we can sort of pinpoint in the Fnatic game which is kind of where it came a little bit unstuck. Great series, one of the best at this event, just in terms of how close it was. Yes. Maybe not the high level, but Optic had a 16-14, then it was 16-10 on Train Fnatic, and then the final map was 16-14, Fnatic on Mirage. And what I've noticed about Optic is like they do have a very broad map pool. They can compete, and they're actually doing vetoes based on their opponents, which you don't always see a lot of, as we've
I have to give them a lot
earlier.
of credit for that. They're doing a great job in that respect.
Yeah. And this is where it gets interesting, because it's like they are so close, in my opinion, to being an unlikely great team. And unfortunately, you've got two issues, and it's this. It's that Freiburg will never be 2013 Freiburg again. It would be unreasonable to expect that. But for me, he's doing what I always thought he would do, which is he would show himself to be a very diligent and studious in-game leader with good in-game temperament, good reads, and an understanding of how to get at your opponent and exploit their weaknesses. I've known Adam many years, and he's always had an understanding of that, right? He's the guy back when we used to play face-to-face at tournaments and there was no soundproof booths, Adam was the guy who knew what to shout at somebody to get under their skin and make them miss shots and make them angry in-game. He would find out shit specifically for that purpose. This guy's a fucking smart motherfucker in that sense. But the issue you've got is his inability to frag. Sure, while we might say, but you give a pass to every other in-game leader, the problem is they are this close. If Freiburg was 2013 Freiburg and this 2017 Freiburg molded into one player, Optic would already be over the top. They would be quite possibly a top 10 team even. So what do you do? Where do you go from here if you're Optic? Because HS, you can't say he deserves to get cut.
The problem with him is, like, he's another example of just an inexperienced player. So the problem is, I don't think anyone reliably can, even if you play with him, can know whether in 6 months he legitimizes himself or he's still the same player. Because at the moment, he is one of the worst examples I've seen of a truly inconsistent player. As in, it's not like he just hasn't gone to the next level. He either has an amazing game or a shit game. That's it. There's no in between for this guy. And you have to go and look, by the way, the correlation between him having a good game and Optic winning a map and him doing badly and them losing a map is pretty strong. It's one of the strongest in this team.
Yep.
So unfortunately, I think you can go either way on that one. You can either say keep him because it's potential and perhaps he develops, or you say, can we get someone established and remove him? Because I agree, Freiburg's obviously fragging terribly. The others are doing all right. They're just doing it by committee, one has a good game or one has a good map. I will also throw in as well, just to keep the theme consistent, I also think it has helped Freiburg to have that guy, I'm a Pet, the former CLG coach. Because if you remember, he was helping CLG get these weird upsets where they would identify different scenarios from analysis. Now, some of those, quite cleverly, which I think he's brought to Optic, would be that you'd figure out the right time to play an opponent on their strong map. So classically, remember, they beat Gambit on Cobblestone when Gambit was undefeated. And then they beat SK on Overpack. They had a bunch of them that they won, right? And what they did is they figured out the right time to give an opponent what seemed to be their best map. But in doing so, know that it's a good map for you, and we're going to literally just plan for that one map the whole time. And we're going to actually eliminate the veto, essentially, because we know where it's going and the opponent doesn't. So I think he's got to have something to do with it, because the idea that you have a team with no classical in-game leader who's doing all these really good vetoes, because as you say, by the way, not only do they do the veto to the map in the end well, but one thing that is very unique about them at the level they're at is that they switch up their ban all the time. That is very unusual. Almost, in fact, normally a team like this, which is just a bunch of fraggers, the first thing they do is play some scrims and go, right, we shot on Mirage, that's our permaban, let's start working on the other 6, That's what they would do, and then get very cynical and be like, right, well, we're really good on this one map, so anytime we can get it there, always go there. They're playing the veto as if they were like FaZe or something, and we've got to get to the right ones we want to go to. So yeah, I've got to give credit to him, but I think obviously I'll couple it with Freiburg and say, like, listen, it doesn't matter how good your coach is, you have to have someone who can implement it in the game. So clearly Freiburg is doing something.
Yeah, definitely. And again, we talk about the talent that's out there and it's available. Apart from the fact that Optic has the buying power to just go out and buy, they can spend, like FaZe can spend. Optic could have gone out and bought a Simple, could have gone out.
Well, here's the thing. Based on what I've heard, I think you've heard similar. Hex is open to it. If he thinks the right player's there, he will break out the checkbook and he will make the upgrade. I have to say, here's the problem I have with this team, right? So on past episodes, I mentioned that one of the reasons why HS constantly gets in the conversation is because since the storyline of Optic is it's supposed to be Freiburg's second chance, obviously no one's going to be like, first things first, get that Freiburg guy the fuck out of here. He's the protagonist of the Optic storyline, isn't he? I'll tell you one very unpopular opinion. Like, if I had to pick a player right now to remove for a really good upgrade, say you told me I can get Simple, or I could get, I mean, who else could we put in that category? I could get Config, someone really good, right? Who's like a guaranteed factor. I might consider fucking removing Mixwell, mate. I feel like he is a jack of all trades, master of none. And even worse, even though I like him as a person, I don't think he has like a killer mentality. Like, I feel like I feel like as a player, he's just, I actually hate this in players. It's one of the reasons why I've always commented that I've always been one of the biggest critics of Forrest, is because Forrest is the guy where he has the skill set to where he should be the best player who ever played. But if you ever talk to him, he's not just telling you a bunch of PR stuff. He really thinks he should be just another player in his team and we should all be good. And, it's not about me and we should all be good fraggers. And, I can have games off, The problem is when you are like some Coldzera, Kobe Bryant level motherfucker, you don't have games off. Every game. In fact, what's mad is I'll give you the contrast. So in his own team, famously, you can contrast Forrest with Get Right. Right, I remember some finals in 1.6 where Get Right like dropped a 30 bomb and did amazingly, and his team lost the map 16-14 or in overtime, and he was literally crying at the bar that it was his fault. Because here's the thing, he was so focused on the idea he had to be the best that he would be like, I would be like, you dropped 30 kills, he'd be like, yeah, but on like the 12th round, like I was like too slow to go into this 1v1 that I could have won, and if I'd have won that, then we'd have won the game. Like, he wasn't looking at his teammates like, why are you motherfuckers doing it? He was like, how can I get it done? Unfortunately, I feel like Mixwell's like that. Like, I think his talent level's very high, but I think there's a good reason now why we've had a couple of Optic lineups where he's kind of been like just wishy-washy, and hasn't really done anything. So bearing in mind.
Yeah, so go on. Finish
very, very, very quick final point is when I look at their lineup, right? So as we said, HS still has to develop, got to get his experience. Freiburg, never going to be a good fragger. You just got to accept that. Then you look at Alu. You don't want Alu to be a star player. You want him to be a stable player. He can do that all day long. The guy is a soldier. Magisk, I think actually he's coming into a bit of form again. He can potentially be a star player. So ideally, if you want to upgrade, you probably want another star player. That's why I say, just looking at I might actually say bring out Mixwell if I could get a config and make some superstar player.
Sure, and the thing I was going to say was that the problem you've got is Mixwell is so fucking versatile, because obviously he's not the primary AWPer in this team, despite having been a primary AWPer in the previous iteration of this team. But there are many maps now where you are going to want to throw in that double AWP setup. So if you bring in a star player who isn't a hybrid player and doesn't have that versatility, you're sort of limiting your tactical potential to maybe get a boost in fragging that may not actually cancel out the inability to play consistently a double up setup on some key maps in your pool. And as I said, Optic will play any fucking map. They look at the opponents as weaknesses when they do a veto, which is, for me, I think that's the better way to actually play a veto rather than playing your strengths. But whatever. That's
especially
obviously
if you're an underdog.
Sure, exactly. That's why it obviously lots of in-game leaders feel philosophically different about that one. But anyway, the point being, they had a great run here. 16-14 against SK. They lost, very close and competitive in all of their matches. Was amazed they lost to North, honestly. They just started way too slow in that game. But they could have topped the group, and who knows what would have happened if they had. But yes, I got to say that for me, they're 1-star upgrade away from being a top 10 team. I really believe that. And it's just a case of who's it going to be that comes in. Obviously, at the moment, lots of chatter about where Dennis is going to go. I think Dennis could fit into this team brilliantly.
That's a great pick, right?
Yeah.
In fact, that's the one right there. There you go. Do that move. If you want to keep all the storylines nice and... Now, by the way, there's obviously the political aspect of, can you remove Mixwell when he is the legacy player of Optic and everyone is a massive... Like, Mixwell, in the mad way, he's not royalty because obviously he hasn't ever been a superstar in the same way a lot of the players I use that term for, but he does have some mad quality where you never see him get criticised. No one ever goes in on Mixwell for having a shit game. It's just allowed.
Yeah, I understand why, because you've got to think about the whole genesis of where Mixwell comes from. This was a guy who was literally scouted.
Ironically, a guy who doesn't have a Mega Drive.
Yeah, not bad. He was scouted specifically to be in this team. Optic's first, kind of secondary foray into CS, because he wasn't in the original lineup they signed, but he got added to it after he was scouted. And this was a guy who was a bit of a pug star. It was like people were saying over in Europe, he'd never do it in a competitive team. Came into what was, by contrast to this roster, a weak Optic lineup, really shone. Great rifler, great AWPer. He was streaming, highlight clips for days. And this is what people remember. That and the fact that he's always been a very emotional player, super nice, never has a bad word to say about anyone. You'll never find him raging on Twitter. And also comes from a country that isn't particularly well represented at the highest level of Counter-Strike anymore, despite having historically a very good connection to the game in the form of Spain. So you throw all this together, obviously no one's ever going to go in on Mixwell, obviously. And to be honest, I think it would be unnecessarily harsh if they did. But you're right.
By the way, when I say that, people always get this wrong as well. So you want people to hate on Mix? No, my point is I don't want anyone to hate on players, but if you're going to do it, be fucking consistent.
Sure, exactly.
I don't know why. Yeah, this is one of those things that get thrown at me as again, Rich. That just has no grounds whatsoever. Yeah, you don't ever criticize your favourite players, Device and Nico. You ever read my Twitter feed?
Yeah,
Fuck my life. You know
Device
those guys.
Actually got a sports psychologist off the back of you constantly going in on him about being a choker.
By the way, I'm not exaggerating here. There is a degree to which those players I'm referring to will never be friends of mine, entirely because those wounds will never heal. So they might be on all right terms with me, but because within my job as a critic, I have had to sometimes be very harsh about them when they have underperformed key context relative to their level. Yes, if you look at Device, the guy has perfectly fine star player numbers every tournament for the last 3 years or whatever. But the point is, in the context of his level, he could have done more. So that I have to criticize him in a way which seems mad because you go, well, he's the best player on that team, So yeah, you've got to be reasonable and understand that you've got to give your fair due to everyone, in my opinion.
Oh, of course. I went through the same thing with Glaive, right? I'd known him from Counter-Strike Source, way back when, me and Lucas. People don't know this. I never told this story, but back when Copenhagen Wolves were a thing and they were maybe getting some investment going on, I was kind of do I want to be a commentator? This all massively predates E-League and stuff. And I was like, do I want to still be a host? Do I want to be a journalist? What do I want to do? Because I actually like working with players and coaching and that kind of thing. I actually like doing that. Right. So I was at some party, and obviously, again, another guy that I've criticized was Jacob, from the owner of Copenhagen Wolves. I've criticized.
Isn't he involved with a refresh now or something?
Yeah, he's over at he's in on the Astralis and refresh kind of train. So he still gets to have a great Danish team, and I think it's a shame because Copenhagen Wolves historically have produced some amazing players. But anyway, we were out there, we were all having beers and having drinks and all that, and he said would you be interested in coming on board and managing this team? And obviously I think some of the players that were playing with Glaive at the time have obviously gone on to be in these current great Danish lineups, and I was like, actually, do you know what, not just this isn't just the booze talking, I'd be totally in on this. It'd be fucking great. And Lucas knew me and he personally asked me and said it'd be great to work with you, I feel we could do great things. So yeah, awesome. And then of course it didn't happen, and all that embarrassing shit happened with fucking Lucas and the tantrum and the girlfriend on stage and all of that, right? And I had to come out and do a fucking show. And what did I do? I didn't go, I nearly worked with that guy. Bloody love that guy. Remember, chinking glasses with him and saying, yeah, can't wait to work with you. I said, what a fucking embarrassment, mate. I fucking wrecked him. And then it was made all the worse because after that, his lung collapsed and then collapsed again and again. He was really ill for a long period of time. All the while I was saying publicly, yeah, I think his career's done. I don't know if he'll get in the top roster. He's had health problems, had that embarrassing thing, bad time to go out on. And fucking anyway, bumped into him while he'd been on the road with Astralis, interviewed him since. And it's I still love the guy, we got history, but when it's he's you feel it, it is different. So the idea that it's you always people like me and you are always going to back your players. Unfortunately, for good or ill, I know I'm never going to be these guys' friends. Like 30 years from now, when I'm like withered away and on my deathbed, none of these dudes are going to turn up. You know what I mean? But what will remain is the legacy of my work and the critique and the journalism and everything. So I honestly, as weird and fucked up as it sounds, I'm more dedicated to that than ever getting into anyone's good books. You know.
Plus, I actually do take a kind of perverse satisfaction in the fact that there are players who people do not know are close friends of mine because I critique them so much, and it seems like I don't big them up. So people actually think the famous examples obviously Get Right, where all modern day fans, because they all started 2015 or 2016 onwards, they all think that me and Get Right, you hate each other. They don't realize that one of the players I've been the closest with for like half a decade or more, literally going back a long, long time on a level you motherfuckers will have no clue about. So actually, the weird thing about this is it's just another example of hypocrisy, because even the people making these comments don't hold everyone in the same standard. By the way, again, caveat, I don't want people to be held to a ridiculous standard that is like this. So for example, if you go back to 2016, there are so many times where Yanko predicted Mouse Sports would win a game where on paper they were not favoured. Do you know what he says, by the way? He says, I don't think he'll mind me saying this. He says, first of all, I don't give a fuck about predictions. I don't think they have anything to do with analysis.
They are garbage. Yeah.
So therefore, say what you want. And secondly, because he's friends with Nico, he just says, I'll just pick Mouse Sports to win and hope they win. Now, in that setting, that's absolutely Yanko's prerogative to go that route. I don't do that. I mean, I've made this case before. People always say I overrate Hiko and I give him too easier time. Go back to the two majors where Hiko plays top 4. I didn't predict him to win a single motherfucking game. I think the only one I predicted him to win was maybe the CLG series. That's it. Otherwise, I had him going out all day long against all the favourites, the upset. Doesn't matter that he's a friend of mine and I know he really wants it and it's a really important tournament. Who gives a fuck? When I'm actually doing my job as an analyst, I do my job as an analyst.
Exactly right. And that's what I mean.
Also, no friend's going to get in the way of me in that fucking long paper.
Nah, I know that, mate. So yeah, let's wrap it up and by talking about SK. So we've kind of bookended the episode. Well, SK and FaZe, obviously.
Yes.
So we got the final that we've been hoping for ages at this event. And I want to say, actually, even though I didn't like the format, I thought this was a great event. Like, full props to ESL. This event threw up some great matches despite not having great teams there. We got an amazing final, the final we wanted, fucking replete with memorable moments. Even though if you look at it on paper, it was kind of one-sided a little bit. It was in a great location. Been saying it for years. Denmark. It is overtaking Sweden in every fucking sense, not just in CS, but even as a location for Counter-Strike.
Looked fucking amazing, right?
Mate, right, Danish. I used to go to the Blasts, the fucking HK lands. I've been going to Danish lands for fucking 10 years, maybe longer, and they're always packed, always full of people who love the fucking games. The only thing they've ever been lacking is serious investment in the area because the population's too fucking small to justify it in the mind of a European sponsorship budget. Well, all that's changed because I'm telling you, all the fans, all the amazing Danish fans who've turned up and filled those fucking stadiums for these past two events back to back with each other, they are going to be a catalyst for altering perceptions about Denmark. And you saw ESL announced it. They've already signed up to do more events just in Udens or however the fuck you say it. So Denmark is like, you'll always have Inferno Online, Sweden, but your days are over as like a mecca of European esports. You had it, it's gone. Fuck you. Just fuck you and all of Sweden. Why not, right? I mean, I don't mean that, but I'm never going back there for obvious reasons. So why not?
We've all got our countries, Rich. We've all got our no-fly lists.
Mate, after watching grown men cry for an act of self-defense, I'm just like, you know what, maybe Sweden's not the country for me. Maybe it isn't. But anyway, but meanwhile, Denmark, love it. Always preferred it, honestly. So there you go. See you in Denmark, motherfuckers. But anyway, so we get the final that we wanted. SK Gaming and FaZe, they've been dodging each other through no fault of their own. They finally come together. Great way to end 2017. And man, this fucking final delivered. And it showed everything that was good. And I suppose everything that was kind of what FaZe is lacking a little bit, but it was just amazing. So what are your thoughts coming out of this final?
Yeah, first of all, I'm just grateful we actually got this as the final, because as you say,
I wanted 5 maps, dude.
Yeah,
but
these are the teams that just kept winning each of the tournaments, but somehow dodging each other. Now, you can't take it for granted, believe it or not, that when you have two teams that are the clear best, that they meet like this. Because actually, like, we had a classic example back in the day where when Fnatic and Envious were the two best teams, they were both winning events. So, like, Fnatic won a few events, then Envious won the major in MLG, then Fnatic won an event, then Envious won the next one where Fnatic wasn't at, and then Fnatic was at an ESEA where Envious wasn't, and they won that. And you kept thinking, fuck, I hope these two meet while they're on. They didn't. What happened is they played a game at, like, the PGL kickoff thing. Because that was the breakout at TSM, it stopped being about Envious and Fnatic, and it was TSM and Fnatic. So you never actually got that proper satisfaction of, like, I mean, the classic example in sports is, no one gives a fuck that Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather had a fight when they were so old. The fight you wanted to see was 10 years before that, 5 years before that, when they would have torn the roof off that motherfucker and given us one of the best fights of all time. So you'll never get that satisfaction. You got that with FaZe versus SK. And I think even the context was awesome, because there's the whole storyline of Carrigan versus Fallen, and then the fact that FaZe lineups haven't beaten SK lineups, and they are the number 1 and the number 2 team. And then they're even such different teams, you know. One is the all-star mix that doesn't have that much team play. One has so much team play, they make some players that aren't even that good seem really good. You know, like, I think it's a fantastic stylistic matchup that makes for a great match. And then even though it was a convincing 3-1 for SK, still it was a very entertaining match that I thought both teams showed who they are as teams, and the better team won.
What I loved about this final, though, is the way that SK Gaming do not give a fuck about your storylines, about how you feel, about what you want, about what their opponents want. I love that swagger to them. Like, here's what I will say. You know, it's a shame that sometimes their social media can be a little bit out of control, and I think maybe, you know, they come out and they just don't take that deep breath before they tweet stuff. But imagine me and you sitting here and criticizing anyone for that. That would be hypocrisy. Because I've done it. I still do it. You still do it. I know you'll do it again. I'll probably do it again at some point. So whatever. If you guys, you know, want to put out tweets that you then have to delete, and it keeps this amazing swagger to your demeanor, fuck it. I'm happy, because SK Gaming, greatest team in the history of CSGO with that core 4, easily eclipses the NIP dynastic period. Fallen, the greatest in-game leader, talent scout, whatever the fuck you want to say about him, it's all fucking true. And this final was just brilliant, because when it got to fucking train, right, and we had the Guardian knife to take it to OT, which is a fucking raging boner moment in Counter-Strike history, they just dicked FaZe in overtime.
Yes.
There will be no 5th map. I mean, imagine what that story would have been like, you know? And then if you do get the final map and it's cash and it's a barn burner, it would be amazing. But SK Gaming don't care. They just win. They win.
They did the same thing at Blast. So Astralis.
Yeah, exactly.
Third map, so close.
Off. Yeah.
And then in overtime, once you do the mental reset, oh, cool, time for us to win. That's the mad thing. What SK have that is very similar to Fnatic, and there are very few teams in any sport will ever have this, is not only do they have the players and the system and the approach that can win the game, but on top of it, they have the mentality where you can't, like, break them mentally. So what's mad is, as you're saying, they don't give a fuck about your storyline. So for example, when you come into this best of 5 here, you're supposed to look at things and say, right, FaZe has only lost once in 11 games on Overpass. Yeah, it was to us, but, you know, will that hold? Will they do well? We played them on Mirage at Blast. They dicked us. They're 12-2 on Mirage. Fuck, Mirage and Overpass is going to be hard for us. Now we're going to win both of those maps. What?
Yeah, exactly. Dude.
Excuse me?
It was insane. I mean, great high level. I want to talk a little bit about what FaZe are lacking, because it's very easy to wax lyrical about SK Gaming. Yes. They've got the best core that has ever existed in CSGO. They've got for me, the best player who ever touched CSGO in the form of Coldzera. Why do I say that? Because while there's people who have had unbelievably high skill ceilings, like Olaf in 2015, Nico when he was like the carry bags for mouse sports, and still to some extent now, these people have all had unbelievable spikes. Coldzera has had those and been consistent with it.
Well, here's the way I would say it, right? Okay, I actually do think you can, like, by the way, I'm not one of these people who was always like, it has to just be Olofmeister. I've always thought, like all sports, once the game's lasted long enough, you can always make a solid case for like 3 or 4 people as the best player, because it always be different reasons, as we're saying. You know, Kenny S, well, he did it with chip players. Olofmeister, he did it with the most successful player. Get right, he did it when everyone was learning the game and he just learned it faster, you know. There's all these reasons why you could put the case. Well, one area I would say that you could just go ahead and say Coldzera wins is whether or not he's the best player ever. We can debate that. Whether or not he's the most consistent player, can debate that. But he is probably the best player for his team that you could ever have.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the difference is, you could take Olofmeister and put him in another team. Maybe he'd be as good, maybe he's worse. You can put Nico in different teams, it'd be good, it'd be worse. The difference is, even in their best teams, they didn't fit their team as well as Coldzera fits his team now. Now, there's a caveat to that, which is I do sometimes wonder what would happen if he had to go, like, let's imagine a world where he got kicked from SK and he had to go and join a new team. I absolutely wonder, how would he perform? Would he be as good? Would he have problems? But in the context that he is in, which is that he's the focal point and everything based around him, it's justified because he gets it fucking done every time. As you're saying, even in losses, the guy drops a 30 bomb.
Yeah, mate, it's madness as well, because this was a guy. Do you remember when he first got picked up for Luminosity and everyone was going, well, who the fuck's this kid? Yeah, legit, he's playing on fucking dexterity or whatever the fuck they were called. And people, and Fallen was like, trust me, guys. He's the right guy for this team. It's gonna work. People saw him and Fallen bickering a few times, and they were like, "Oh, well, trouble in paradise." Now, Fallen and Coldzera might go back at it. That is a partnership, like, where you just have to accept, even if we do argue with each other, we're too good. We must always work together. It's Shaq and Kobe. You know, it is so fucking insane that Fallen was able to identify the level of talent that this kid has, bring him into a team, and basically Coldzera is the catalyst for this unbelievable fucking run of form and creating one of the greatest teams that's ever existed in any form of Counter-Strike. So, yeah, I mean, you can talk about them till the cows come home. What I want to end the show with is talking about what FaZe lack.
Yes.
How are they ever going to get over this fucking hoodoo? Because people have started to go at Carrigan a little bit. I don't know if that's fair.
What's funny is they're doing that thing, Rich, that when we talked about MSL, I made sure like we provided both aspects. Yeah, you can definitely pick all these aspects of MSL that are negative. But what you can't do is 2 things. One, say that you know that someone would do a better job with his team. You don't, because he's done such a great job at his level. Secondly, you can't just discount all his positives. So MSL has some fantastic qualities as an in-game leader. Likewise, Carrigan has some amazing qualities. What an amazing pick-ban player. What clever player to come up with different approaches. Ability to use every player he's ever had in a lineup he's played with. Look outrageous levels of players he's played with and got them all to a championship level. You know, amazing quality. But yes, clearly has some weaknesses. And unfortunately, his biggest losses when the weaknesses, like MSL, seem to be the most apparent. So they're just shouting out for you to talk about them, aren't they?
Yeah, so I mean, like, you know, Carrigan, it's really hard, isn't it? Because even if Carrigan went his entire career being in the shadow of Fallen, every other in-game leader is in the shadow of Fallen. Yes. And it will always be that way. Like, I don't know what would need to happen in 2018, right? Because keep in mind, all the planets are aligning. It looks like Immortals, it was reported by DK, have bought the Made in Brazil brand. That's supposedly a thing. And then we're hearing rumors that this SK Gaming team are moving to another organization in 2018. It was possibly touted as Immortals. So imagine the fucking godhead, right? It's Fallen, MIBR, it's all back. It's all happening. What the fuck are FaZe going to do in 2018? Like, you know, it looks like 2018 is going to be a Brazilian year for Counter-Strike, no doubt about it. And I don't know, like, I don't think Carrigan is necessarily doing anything wrong. It's just that your nemesis is the fucking, greatest. It's like playing tennis and being number 2 when Federer's playing.
Oh, there's a great example, Richard. I'll give you an example, exactly what you're saying there. One of the most underrated tennis players in the history of tennis is the player Andy Roddick, who was an American player. And what he did was, right, he was at his peak began about a year and a half before Federer's did. And because of that, he won a Grand Slam. He won the US Open, his home Grand Slam. And then during his absolute prime, he constantly made it to the Wimbledon final. He was an incredibly good grass player with a really good serve. His problem was, in something like 3 Wimbledon finals, he played Roger Federer, and in at least like 2 of them, Federer was in like full-on greatest of all time mode. So in history, people who are tennis fans, by the way, tennis fans, like every sport, they're as bad as every other sport. What they do is they go, really good player, really won fucking 1 Grand Slam, just overrated. What they don't realize is, who was he denied by? Just the fucking greatest player of all time, constantly. So what's in any other era, maybe he gets 3 or 4 Grand Slams. That's already making you like, oh, pretty good player, nice career, Hall of Fame type guy. You see what I mean, though? People downplay it because they don't realize that you can have bad timing just in as much as either the wrong opponent is number one or you're just in the wrong era to have your prime. And that's what happened with Carrigan, with Fnatic first, and now with fucking it was actually Envious that used to be his counter, but and then obviously now with Fallen and the Luminosity and the SK guys, because obviously an amazing in-game leader. As I've said, he's taken 3 almost completely different lineups to championship level. He's taken teams repeatedly to semis, playoffs of majors. This guy's been an amazing in-game leader.
Yeah, I did see, I saw some FaZe fans going after Carrigan. I was like, come on, dudes. It's not on him. He's elevated this fucking team. You can't cut him.
Well, think about this, Rich. I'll give you a sports analogy. That would be like, there was all those years in the 2010s and 2000s where the Colts used to famously win like 11 games in the regular season, go into the playoffs and just get straight busted out in the first game.
Yeah.
Right? If any Colts fan in that period was like, you know what? Fuck Peyton Manning. Get him out the team. You'd go, are you out of your motherfucking mind? He's the reason we're in that position. Yeah. You take him out, we're not even in that position. Yeah, he's got his flaws, but it's like that saying, you've got to go with the one that takes you to the dance or whatever the fuck, isn't it? You got to, that's the reason you got in the first place. So what I'll say is this. First of all, there's an optimistic way to look at it if you're a FaZe fan, which is like this. Believe it or not, they actually don't have to fix this problem. Because they're such an amazing team and Carrigan is doing so well against everyone else, first and foremost, here's the upside, right? There is no SK at ECS, so you can win ECS. There's no SK with Volts at the major. You might win a motherfucking major. So there we go. Already you've got some great accomplishments. Secondly, I don't know why everyone has to ride so hard on every single result. Like, why are we pretending like SK is never going to lose a series now? No. There are worlds in which Astralis will be SK and maybe G2 will be SK, and who knows if another maybe Cloud9 one day will be SK. I don't fucking know. But when that happens, FaZe can beat everyone else at the moment. Now FaZe goes past and wins the tournament, as they managed to at all these tournaments where they didn't beat SK. It can happen. So you can definitely still have an amazing career. If you want to ask how can they beat SK, now, that's an incredibly tough nut to crack because unfortunately, I think SK plays into all of FaZe's actual weaknesses.
And this is the key, right? Like, what makes this final even more one-sided than the 3-1 appears and the great moments and the overtime on Train is that right now, SK aren't playing Nuke or Inferno, and SK have just reconciled with the fact pick Inferno, we'll probably lose it, we'll beat you on everything else. Fallen will not allow that to happen forever. There will come a point where they're going to knuckle down on one of those 2 maps, likely Inferno.
God forbid they do take Nuke out.
Well, that's what I mean. I saw you tweet about that today. If Nuke does go out of the competitive roster, which is interesting, plenty of in-game leaders are calling for this. SK Gaming, ban Inferno, and you lose to SK forever. Like, if you're... it just gets harder. So, that's the worry for me. Like, one of the things I will say, and then I say we'll wrap up the show, was that for the longest period of time we talked about how good FaZe's map pool is, and it is. But I think maybe we have overstated it. They are definitely weak on some of the maps that they should be better on. The overpass streak that Carrigan has against Fallen is ridiculous, considering Carrigan made Astralis the team that they were on overpass at that time. He's obviously someone with a very good understanding of the map. They've had a few shaky results on overpass lately. I feel they should be a lot better on Mirage. That should have been more competitive for me. Definitely need to do some work on that. Train, I think, is still pretty solid. Inferno, they're probably the best team on that map right now. No one else has really nailed it to the same degree FaZe has, but they've still had some upset results on it. And we saw how the pick of cash nearly backfired against Astralis at the E-League finals.
Yes.
And that could have been a nightmare for Carrigan. He was still waking up from. So actually, when we think about it, maybe FaZe do need to go back to the drawing board and start nailing down some of these maps, because perhaps they have been cruising a little bit on that star power in the roster.
The big problem I see for FaZe is that they do have a good map pool, because they have the 3 maps they're amazing on: Inferno, Mirage, Overpass. They are so good on that, they can even play the other best teams and beat them on it. Their big problem is they have a decent map pool, because the difference is if they play Train or they play Cash against someone who's not top 4, they can still win. They can still brute force it. They can still just win the fucking game. So as a result, that makes their map pool de facto fine. Their problem is these maps, if you are a team who can play them and you are world class, now they have their flaws. And if you notice, look at these maps. These are maps where they win their main 3 maps by having these amazing CT sides. Well, on the maps they're not as good on, and therefore the CT sides aren't as good on, their C sides just fall apart, because first of all, there's never been a team in the history of the game who relied on a pistol round as much as FaZe does. They rely on pistol rounds and force buy wins so much. Actual T-side gun rounds. Okay, you want to know something crazy? This is an example for fans of how you aren't doing analysis right if you ever say that dumb shit of like, well, to be number 1, you've got to be good in all areas, right? This is about as close to a fact as you can get when it's really just an opinion, but very conclusive, okay? North has way better T-side gun rounds than FaZe Clan. Yet FaZe Clan has way better players, is a way better team, will win way more tournaments, will be much better remembered by history than North. But North has much better T-side gun rounds, actual tactics, things they can run reliably. North has a very shallow pool in that respect. And the problem with that is I don't know that you can fix that, because I think it's a factor of having all these superstar players who are used to being the playmaker, being the player who is played around, not used to catering to someone else. So a lot of what they do on T-side is still individual. It's still allowing a guy room to work. It's still saying, Rain, just run in there with an AK, kill someone, and if you do, we'll follow you up. That's not tactics. Tactics are like, well, here's the extreme example, isn't it? It's like you go and watch LDLC in an EPL game. What happens is Existence studies the opponent and has worked so many hours in practice that he calls a strat where you only have to get 1 trade kill and push 1 CT back and you've got a bomb plan. Now, it doesn't matter that you then lose the round and you lose the game. The tactic got you that round. FaZe has nothing like that. FaZe must get headshot AK kills to win T-side rounds.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely have to get back to the drawing board, and you're right. This over-reliance on force buys, the fact that they've got probably the best pistol team,
it's nuts, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to actually look at that as a statistic, what percentage they win.
I know that when they had their streak, the one where they won the 2 events undefeated, they were something outrageous. Like literally, I'm talking like 21 to like 5 in pistols or something mental.
Yeah, and Guardian's a big part of that, actually. Like people sleep on Guardian on pistols. He's fucking
he's
sick with pistols.
Yeah, underrated.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, and I think hopefully this is like a moment again where you can sort of just take a little bit of a pause and just sort of actually just nail down a map. Just nail down a map perfectly, tactically. For me, if I was FaZe, what I would be doing is I would be looking to crack that overpass nut, because if you can get to a level where you're the best overpass team in the world, it serves the dual purpose of being, well, you've got that map back in your locker, but you're stripping it away from SK Gaming. I don't know if it's even worth putting in all the hours just to have strats that are just literally based around countering SK should you ever play them, Carrigan's approach to that map doesn't seem to have changed much from Astralis, and it's come a long way since then. You watch how like SK Gaming play the map now; it's perfection.
Part of the problem is like this is actually an example of where again there aren't easy solutions. Like it's not like cheating on an exam and you just find out what your mate's answers are.
Can't copy the homework,
No, it doesn't work. Because, for example, I already know the team that's countered SK on Overpass because they have always countered SK on Overpass. It is Astralis. Go and watch any of the series where Astralis won Overpass against SK, and the same story happens every time. Device at the A site repeatedly picks off Fur and Fallen because he scouts them and they set him up so that his flank's covered. Right? The problem is, unfortunately, for whatever reason, with the team they have, I mean, they obviously don't have the same level of structure. Like, Astralis is famous for having like amazing like two-man setups, like having someone watching a flank, so you never have to think about that. FaZe doesn't have any of that. So even though they know FaZe pushing that bathroom, even though they know Fallen can get aggressive, knowing it doesn't mean they have the tool to counter it, unfortunately. And as you're mentioning here, unfortunately, the biggest killer for FaZe is that what they're doing works against every other team on the map.
Yeah.
That's the killer. So the problem is, if it's working every time against except one team, there's going to be that thing in the back of your mind, like, am I really going to put in all this time for one team? Can I just hope that we win, or hope that someone else beats them, or hope that, in this case, like I mentioned when I did my preview video, this case, you're already doing the same thing they're doing. So, SK is going, well, we're probably going to lose Inferno. Okay, so FaZe is going, right, we might lose Overpass. Just got to win Mirage. Problem is, then when you don't win Mirage, you ask it out of luck.
Yeah, I know, man. It's crazy. And it can be done, because if you think about all the times SK Gaming haven't like won a tournament we expected them to win, it comes on Overpass. Virtus Pro did it in that legendary series. That's one of the best series of the year.
Yes.
I think G2 had an upset win against them on Overpass as well at EPL, right? So that's the nut you've got to crack, I think, if you're FaZe. That's, an observation. But anyway, look, the show's run over. It's like a 2.5-hour show. But of course, we cut out all the best bits. So it'll only actually be a 50-minute VOD in the end. So thanks to all the people who tuned in live. And indeed, let's read out our patrons that make the show possible, which of course is Big Hungry. Shout out to Seth, the big donator, $400. Chris N. Wynn, $380. Detlef Insomniac, Mateus Pietkowski, and Jerky's Minion all donated $100 or more. $50 patrons, Funky Boy, Sard Sawar, Daniel Plamanov, Yordanov, Marcus Kyunpa, CMFX, Carl Oscar Garcia Firm, Humongous Watt, and William Southern. Thanks to all of you. Without you, the show wouldn't be possible. And of course, we're going to be, I don't know when we'll next do one, because I think I'm actually occupied on Tuesday next week, because I think we're filming a Christmas special or something for E-League.
We'll just do another damn show.
Yeah. And plus pneumonia is going to kill me. I'm going to have the full easy E. I'm just going to get into the doctors, and my T-cell count's going to be lower than Sam's IQ.
You can be easy E, and I'll be Yeezy E.
Not your best work, but good try.
Well, if you don't
timestamp that.
Cut that out. Cut out all the jokes that don't work, Sam.
And thanks to Sam for pushing all the buttons. But we'll be back at some point next week. 2 more shows to go this month. We're also thinking about doing a Christmas special where we bring on some guests and do some awards and that kind of thing. I'll plan that. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, take care.